Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Hashirama seals all Senju clan chakra inside Naruto. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Thanathos and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. History is decided by those who sit down and record it. They in turn are bound by the information they receive and their own honesty. It is said that when the first Hokage fought Madara Uchiha in the Valley of the End, he managed to gain a narrow victory, but succumbed to his injuries shortly before he reached the village. His brother, the later Nidame, who had accompanied his brother and was badly wounded himself, had reported that Madara had been completely obliterated by the Shaddai. However, should one open the Shaddai's tomb? 13 years prior to the Kyuubi attack. A pale man with slitted eyes entered the secret catacombs of the Hokages. He, Orochimaru, greatest of the Sannin, was standing before two coffins of solid stone. There was room for more coffins, but they had yet to be placed. And why should they be? The old fossil had yet to surrender his seed or drop dead, so there was no need to bury him yet. And afterwards, when he was Hokage, there would be no need to bury him, as he would be the immortal Hokage. After all, his only real competition for the seat of Hokage was the yellow flash Minato Namikaze, and that the goofy Raymond freak would become Hokage was more than doubtful. But Orochimaru hadn't come here to ponder, nor out of some sentimental reason. He carefully inspected the coffins, checking for seals or other means that would show it had been opened. Finding nothing, he carefully opened the coffin closest to him. He smiled as he recognized the corpse of the Nidame, bedded in dried flowers and with a few personal belongings that were useless to Orochimaru. He could have used the sword, but such powerful objects were sadly not placed inside of coffins in case situations like these occurred. But the body itself was in an amazingly good condition, considering how long the man was dead already. Orochimaru suspected that the low temperatures, it was freezing in here, had preserved the remains. Scavengers were kept out by the coffin, and it was simply too cold for most bacteria that decomposed remains to function. Orochimaru grinned as he collected DNA samples. Hair was good, better than skin, but not as good as blood, but the DNA in it lasted the longest, and Orochimaru took all three before carefully resealing the coffin. After all, he didn't want the old fossil or anyone else to find out about this. Then he turned his attention to coffin number 2. He had to suppress a grin. Christmas had come early this year. While the Nidame's abilities would be useful, it was the other carcass that truly captivated his attention. The Shaddai, who could control wood and even subjugate the Bijuu, second only to Madara Uchiha. Orochimaru could hardly wait to experiment with that power. He opened the coffin and nearly howled in rage. It was empty. Only a few dried up flowers and useless personal items. Where was the Shaddai's corpse? Had someone learned of his plan? No, if that were the case, both corpses would have been removed and he would have faced the old fossil and a squad of Anbu by now. Which left only two conclusions. Either someone else had also thought of Orochimaru's idea and took it first, unlikely seeing as he wouldn't have left the second corpse or the coffin had been empty from the start. That had to be it. But how? Why? He rummaged through the items, in desperate hope of finding something, anything of use. Then he found it. A short lock of hair, apparently some sort of good luck charm. It had the right color, black, but that didn't have to mean much. But with the sentimental fools living here, it was likely they wanted to bury at least something of their leader. Orochimaru looked at the hair. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The hair should have enough DNA for his purposes. And the material he gained from the Nidame would also give him a few interesting experiments. But he couldn't help but wonder where the Shaddai's corpse was. Valley of the End, great battle. Madara breathed heavily as he allowed himself a short look around. Not far from him, maybe 30 feet to his left, the Kyuubi, greatest of the 9 beasts lay helpless, bound by countless roots, unable to move. In front of him stood his rival and greatest foe, Hashirama Senju, equally exhausted. Most of his weapons were broken and scattered over the battlefield. Another 40 feet behind him was his brother, laying on the ground with multiple deep cuts from Madara's side. He was bleeding badly, but he would live if left alone. Madara wondered what had possessed his rival and in a way, his friend, to bring the boy along. While the mastery he displayed over water was impressive, the boy simply lacked both experience and skill to compete with either of them. Madara's gaze returned to Hashirama, then he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan had faded from his eyes, revealing the normal Sharingan with its 3 tomo. Then he laughed. Hashirama looked at him. What is so amusing, Madara? Said person calmed down. Simple, even you have to admit that we are fighting a battle like there never was one before. Look around, our struggle has formed a valley. Hashirama nodded, a small smile gracing his features. Well, I take no joy out of war and combat, even I must admit what happens here will become legend. But tell me, what now? Madara tilted his head. We are both almost completely out of chakra, there is no point in either of us denying that. In skill and strength, we are equals. I would even say that under normal circumstances, you may have very well defeated me here. However, Hashirama, you have made a fool's error. You have someone you need to shield, for I can kill him even without my chakra. Hashirama's eyes widened as he realized that Madara was right. In a fight man against man, he would have likely won, as his most powerful blade was still intact. However, if Madara redirected his attacks to Tobirama, he would take the hits. And then he'd be too weakened to withstand Madara's assault. Tobirama was cursing himself. He had insisted on joining his brother, claiming that against the fire jutsus the Uchiha were famous for, his abilities with water might be useful. Not that his brother wasn't skilled with water, but it was unlikely Madara would fight them close to the river, knowing the weakness of his skills just as well as they did, and his ability to draw the moisture out of the air and multiply it would be a help. And it had, until Madara had tired of his interventions and took him out of the fight in an instant. Tobirama had only figured out what had hit him when he noticed his blood dripping down Madara's scythe. And now his brother would die because he had to shield him, and when his brother fell, the only barrier between Madara and Konoha would fall with him. Nobody else in the Leaf was as skilled as Madara, and without Hashirama, the fox would wreak havoc in the village. The sound of bursting wood and a deafening roar pulled all three out of their thoughts. They saw that the fox had broken its restraints and its head was shooting towards Hashirama and Madara, tilted sideways to give the bite the widest range possible. For an instant, Madara seemed confused, then he understood. Both he and Hashirama had made a fatal mistake. They had both used too much chakra and were now unable to tame the beast. Hashirama was too weakened to restrain it and he himself couldn't keep his eternal Mangekyo active anymore. Normally, the continued activation wouldn't be necessary, but Madara had noticed that unlike any other creature, including the other Biju as far as he had researched, the Kyuubi would break its mental restraints almost instantly if he deactivated the Mangekyo. And he had just done that. They had been fools to simply forget the beast and use so much chakra, and now they would pay for it. He sighed, knowing he couldn't even delay the inevitable. He had always wondered if it was true that one's entire life flashed before one's eyes if they met certain death. When one was in a situation where he was facing death and said force told him, "I'm here. In 5 seconds, you're dead. Spend them however you want, I'll give you that much time. You'd see a best of your entire life of sorts." He had doubted it, after all, once you were dead, nobody would know. Dead men tell no tales, as they say. But to his own surprise, he indeed remembered the single best thing in his life, which had been the most painful to lose. His brother. "Izuna, I'm sorry," he whispered. Hashirama heard him and gave him a sympathetic smile. He was the last to deny the love Madara held for his brother, even though many others did. He remembered like it had been yesterday. Flashback. Hashirama had expected much, but not this. He had taken over the Senju clan 2 weeks ago, and now his rival, Madara Uchiha, also freshly baked clan leader of the Uchihas, was standing before him. He had already rubbed his eyes and pinched himself to make sure he wasn't seeing things. He straightened himself. "What do you want here, Madara Uchiha?" he asked. The man bit his lip, it was obvious he was swallowing his pride. "I wish to request your aid," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. Hashirama raised a brow. He had expected anything, from clan talk to an assassination attempt, but not this. "How exactly are we supposed to help you?" he asked. Madara stared at the ground. "My brother has infected himself with an unknown disease. We have tried everything, and nothing has worked. I need your help." His voice had begun to shake. Hashirama nodded, he had heard that Izuna was bedridden. The Senju clan had thrown a small party when they heard the news that one of the feared Mangekyo wielders was down for the count. "But why turn to us? Of course we have a few medical prodigies, but there are other good medics outside of our clan." Now Madara looked up, with sorrow and desperation in his eyes and voice. "Don't you think I've already tried? I've went everywhere, but no one can help him." "Watch your tongue." One of the Senju members shouted, clearly enjoying watching Madara squirm. Then Madara did something no one would have ever expected. He bowed. He dropped to his knees and bowed until his forehead touched the ground. "I beg of you, help my brother." Everyone knew the Uchihas were proud before anything else. For Madara to throw his pride so far out the window, he had to be truly desperate. Hashirama looked at his own brother. If Tobirama were to fall sick and nobody but the Uchiha had the means to cure him, would he bow before Madara as Zed was now bowing before him? The answer was obvious. Yes, he would. He'd be on his knees, he'd be kissing Madara's feet if there was a chance it would help. He rose from his seat. "Stand up," he said. Madara slowly rose, fear and a sliver of hope in his eyes. Hashirama rose his voice. "As leader of the Senju clan, I hereby accept your request. We will send a group of our best medics with you and they will do all in their power to help your brother. This is not up for discussion. He added when pandemonium broke out in the compound. And the medics had helped, albeit reluctantly. They had managed to cure Izuna Uchiha of his disease, but said man would likely never regain his full abilities as a ninja. The disease had simply done too much damage to muscles and nerves they couldn't cure. He could still be ninja, but never be as strong or fast as he was before, upper middle class at best. Shortly after, Izuna had begged Madara to take his eyes, saying that in his condition, he was not as important to the Uchiha as Madara, and that blindness was nothing Madara could afford. Madara had argued for hours before reluctantly giving in. The operation was a success, and Izuna even found a way to remain a ninja despite his blindness. He had developed a jutsu that replaced his eyes and was even able to return to the battlefield, where he eventually fell by the hand of a small, relatively unknown clan. Madara would have accepted his brother's death, as fatalities occur in war, but that clan had desecrated his brother's corpse. The same day that Izuna's corpse was found, the compound of the clan that had desecrated him burned to the ground in black fire. There were no survivors. Flashback end. Hashirama nodded at Madara before using his last chakra to summon a root that shoved Tobirama out of harm's way and the fox's jaws. He looked at Madara. "It was an honor," he said. "Likewise," Madara replied. A moment later, the jaws snapped shut and Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha were no more. The Kyuubi growled in satisfaction, then in surprise as the vegetation started to attack it while black fire spread over its back. Apparently, the two great warriors wouldn't go down without a fight. The fox jumped back, then it quickly vanished, leaving Tobirama for dead. But he wasn't. He dragged himself back to the village and told them a lie about what happened. It wasn't evil intention, he just had yet to fully comprehend what had happened himself. Later he put a lock of Hashirama's hair into his coffin so that something of him would lay there once the hinged buncheon dismissed itself. Sequence end. History may be distorted, both out of evil and good intentions. It is said that the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze sacrificed his life to slay the great Kyuubi when it attacked the leaf. Some know better, but choose to remain silent. Others wish they had remained silent and now tried to force a silence. Why? The Kyuubi is a demon, and demons are immortal, and nothing short of the end of the world can kill them. With one exception. Any demon may be sealed inside of a person, and should that person die without releasing his prisoner, he'll drag the demon with him to death. But that is a knowledge long forgotten. But the Yondaime, without knowing that he walked the only path leading to a demon's true demise, sealed the Kyuubi in the navel, his only hours-old son, Naruto. For the seal he summoned the Shinigami, who demand souls in return for his service, seeing it was the only being powerful enough to rip the Kyuubi's soul from its body. But when the Shinigami is summoned by mortals, only devours souls in pairs. Sarutobi sighed. He had made the mistake of informing the accursed council of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki. What had he been thinking? The council was an invention of the Nidaime. He had correctly presumed that the Hokage would not be able to handle everything and chose to call for aid. For military matters, the clan heads and other qualified ninja would advise the Hokage. In civilian matters, merchants and other qualified people would be helping the Hokage to lessen his load. It sounded perfect and on paper, it had looked even better. The Nidaime had later told Sarutobi that he was absolutely certain he had been drunk at the time he created the council. While the idea was good, the reality was different. The council had gotten used to the power and started to abuse it on a regular basis. Nothing major, except a major annoyance that instead of helping the Hokage cope with his work, they were adding more of it. And now this. Not even 5 seconds after Sarutobi revealed that the Kyuubi was not slain, but sealed inside of Naruto, the council had demanded his death. Mostly the civilians. Sarutobi had to fight the urge to kill some of the civilians that had the nerve to speak of losses when they had arrived only after the Kyuubi had been sealed. He was glad that most of the shinobi were keeping silent, Danzo being one of the unfortunate exceptions. The man seemed dead set on turning the boy into a weapon, something Sarutobi would never allow. He sighed again. Life for young Naruto Uzumaki would not be easy. He had no idea how right he was. Chapter 2. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. Talking. Thoughts. Biju summon. Shouting. Jutsu. Within the village hidden in the leaves, a freshly turned 7-year-old was running for his life. His name was Naruto Uzumaki and he was getting desperate. He would have been long gone by now, but he had forgotten Gama-chan, his purse, in his apartment. Normally he would have left it there, but it was Tuesday and he had just received his weekly allowance yesterday. The villagers would beyond a doubt raid and thrash his apartment, and if they found Gama-chan, all his savings plus this week's money would be gone and he would again be closer to starvation. Naruto was, for some reason he didn't understand, the most hated boy in the entire village. He had been thrown out of the orphanage 2 years ago and lived on the streets for a few months until he had managed to sneak into the Hokage tower and tell Jiji they had thrown him out. Once the old Hokage learned of this and that his secretary had always sent him away when he tried to talk to him, Naruto got a small apartment and a weekly allowance, while the secretary was fired. But his situation had not improved much. While he no longer had to steal simply to survive, he still had to pay ridiculous prices for food that was bordering on rotten at best. The only exception was a ramen stand run by a nice old man named Tucci and his daughter Ayam. They were nice to him and even gave him the occasional free bowl of ramen. But Naruto knew he couldn't go there in his situation. Most of the times, the villagers simply ignored him, acting like he didn't exist, at least when they weren't overcharging him, only occasionally beating him. But on October 10th, things got really bad. It was the day the nine-tailed fox, Kyuubi, was defeated by the Yondaime, but it was also Naruto's birthday. For some reason, large mobs shouting something about demons tended to gather that day to hurt him, and Naruto spent his birthdays running for his life. The orphanage had never offered him protection from those people, the people there had actually tried to hold him so he couldn't get away. On his 4th birthday, he had tried running to Hokage Jiji, but the secretary had stopped him and called out to inform the mob of his location. That year, only the Anbu the Sandaime had placed on Naruto had stood between him and certain death. The Chiraku ramen didn't offer any protection, they couldn't beat the mob, and Naruto didn't want to drag them into this. Naruto wondered what he had done to deserve such treatment, but he had no idea. It couldn't be his pranks, they were harmless, and the villagers had hated him long before he started pranking people so they would look at him. Naruto was craving for attention, he was terrified of the loneliness that had claimed more and more of his life. He was cheerful and trusting by nature, and even the beatings and glares couldn't change that, but the loneliness was tearing him apart. Well, the people chasing him seemed to try and take over that job. He decided to do what he, since his 5th birthday, always did when there was a mob on his tail. He ran into the forest. There was an Ichan living there that offered him protection ever since he had met her exactly 2 years ago. Well, maybe he just thought she was nice because she threw the sharp objects at the mob, not him. But her performance at their first meeting was beyond a doubt the coolest and most disturbing thing he had ever seen. Flashback. Naruto's 5th birthday. Naruto had run into the forest, desperate to escape the more than 100 people that were running after him. They were gaining fast, and Naruto ground to a halt when he suddenly saw a girl in a trench coat standing before him. She didn't look like she was after him, simply because she looked just as surprised as he did. But the stop had cost him. The mob slowly came to a halt before them. Well, what have we here? One of the villagers spoke. The snake whore and the demon brat, both at the same place. Guess what, bitch, it's your lucky day. Hand over the brat and we'll let you go unharmed. If you try to fight, then you'll share his fate. The girl let her gaze wander over the villagers with their makeshift weapons. She saw a couple of Chunin, but to her relief no Jonin or Anbu. She glared at the speaker. So, now you want to kill this poor boy? No chance in hell. The man shrugged. Don't say we didn't give you a choice. With that, they slowly came closer. The girl pushed Naruto behind her and grabbed a few pills. Naruto looked at her as she ate them. Nobody but Jiji and those masked people had ever helped him. He heard her mutter, I really hope this works. Even with the soldier pills, it might not be enough. Well, here goes something. With that, she bit her thumb, formed a few hand signs, and shouted Kuchiyas no Jutsu. Smoke blocked Naruto's sight, and when it cleared, a giant snake with horns was in front of them. Its huge body was purple and had black stripes, and it was looking right at them. Who dare summon Manda? The giant serpent hissed, yet his voice was deafening. Naruto and the entire mob gulped. The girl looked ready to faint from exhaustion, but she managed to speak. Great Manda, I have summoned you. My name is Anko Mitarashi. Manda looked at her. For what purpose have you summoned me, girl? Anko bowed. I would not dare make demands on our first meeting. But, as an apology for my audacity to summon your lordship and as an offering, I have gathered these sacrifices. They are yours. She pointed at the mob. Manda's gaze left her and landed upon the villagers, who were now frightened out of their minds. 127 sacrifices. Very well, young summoner, you are forgiven. Manda hissed. Some villagers tried to run, but with one of the explosive bursts of speed snakes are famous for, Manda had shot forwards and swallowed them whole. Then he looked at Anko. You may summon me if needed, but I demand sacrifices for my cervix. How many depends on why you call me. Anko weakly raised a hand. May I pay these in advance? And if so, how many offerings is the minimum I must gather before the sacrifice? Manda seemed to consider the question. Very well. He replied, but I demand at least 40 offerings when summoned, unless my power is needed, then, we will decide the pricks. With that, he vanished and Anko collapsed. Naruto supported her so that she wouldn't fall. He smiled at her. Thank you for helping me. Anko grinned. No problem, kid. We outcasts have to stick together now, don't we? Just come to me if more idiots are chasing you, I'll send them packing with a kunai up their ass and a pair of balls lighter. Naruto didn't quite understand just what she would do, but he nodded. And even though villagers screamed for the demon brats and the snake whores' heads for the disappearance of over 100 honest, hardworking villagers, the Sandaime never found any proof that linked Naruto or Anko to the mysterious disappearances. Not that he tried hard to find any. Flashback end. Naruto had managed to hide Gama-chan, but afterward he found that the villagers had blocked all escape paths out of the village and were now searching for him. Naruto realized that this was planned by someone and that his protectors were probably kept away from him. He was on his own. The council, the civilian part, the Hokage's advisors and Fugaku Uchiha to be more precise, felt the urge to give themselves a pat on the back. Their plan was brilliant. The demon was trapped inside the village with no escape and all 4 Anbu that were assigned to guard him today had been worked to the ground during the last weeks until they had forgotten the date. Then others, comrades as they would think, would come along and convince the watchers to skip their duty, saying that their partner, guarding Naruto was always a 2-man job, could watch the boy alone for one day. After all, they deserved a break. All 4 would then be kept away from anything that could jog their memory, they had even delayed the festival for that, including each other. Yes, Itachi Uchiha, Kakashi Haddock, Yugao Yuzuki and Tenzo really deserved a day off, and the council, in their limitless compassion, made sure they got it. As for the Hokage, he would be caught up in pointless meetings with the council for the entire day. While the other clan heads were getting annoyed by the civilians, Fugaku could hardly suppress a smirk. After all, one of the watchers, his son Itachi, who additionally had been worked into the ground by the clan, was probably spending a nice day with his best friend, Shisui. Itachi would probably forget Naruto Uzumaki ever existed. Itachi sighed. The last weeks had been more than exhausting, with both the council and his clan working him into the ground. Normally that wouldn't have stopped him from performing his duty to watch Naruto, but Shisui had met him this morning, and they ended up hanging out close to the Uchiha district. The river was next to them, separating them from the rest of Konoha. Itachi had a few sticks of Pocky, and he could finally relax with his best friend. Shisui was right. The other Anbu should be able to watch Naruto alone for one day. He'd apologize to the Hokage and to Naruto, who he had started to see as a second little brother, tomorrow. What could possibly happen? Shisui hid an evil smirk. Unlike Itachi, he knew exactly what day it was and what would happen. He never liked the blonde kid that somehow managed to befriend Itachi, and he was more than willing to keep his best friend busy until the little hellspawn was dead. Then he would play clueless and life would go on. It seemed foolproof. Kakashi and another Anbu he knew as Nezumi, due to his rat mask, were sitting on a bench, noses buried in a little orange book. Nezumi had convinced the completely overworked Kakashi to skip his watch duty in favor of a visit to a certain bookstore. Jiraiya the Toad Sage had just released a book that would later come to be known as the predecessor of the Icha Icha series, and Kakashi had been itching to buy and read it, but he hadn't found the time, seeing as it came out only 2 days ago. No harm in a little reading, he'd just apologized to whoever his partner for today was, the Hokage and Naruto later. He liked Naruto. Unlike man-idiots, he not only saw a remarkable resemblance between the boy and his own sensei, but he also had the brain capacity to add 2 and 2. Naruto was the Yondaime's son, he had even managed to get the Sandaime to admit it. But Naruto would forgive him for missing one day. Behind the mask, Nezumi couldn't help but smirk. He had lost his entire family to the demon, but instead of getting its deserved fate, the abomination was walking around like he owned the place, mocking them all with its sheer presence, basking in the protection the kind old Sandaime was foolishly giving him. But this would end today. Kakashi was much too tired and focused on his little book to remember the Kyuubi festival. Tenzo sighed. Even though he admitted that he desperately needed a break, he still felt guilty about skipping his duty to watch Naruto. It simply went against his nature and training to ignore orders, but Usagi in his rabbit mask had a point. Tenzo needed rest, and the chance that a mob huge enough to overpower even a lone Anbu before he signaled for backup was incredibly small. So he had, against better knowledge, agreed to spend a day on the outdoor garden of a certain restaurant. Usagi knew that there would be no Anbu to help the demon brat today. She had adored the Yondaime, and that the great man had fallen while his murderer was walking around in the very village his hero had died to defend from him, mimicking the Yondaime's face to further humiliate them no less, was an unforgivable blasphemy. And today the grand task the Yondaime had began would finally end today. And she would play an important role in the completion of this noble quest. She could almost see the Yondaime smiling at him from the heavens. Yugao couldn't help but release a sigh. She had just left the hot springs Yacho, Bor had more or less dragged her into. Despite her exhaustion, she had never minded watching Naruto. If he wasn't about to be beaten by some stupid drunks, he was quite fun to watch. But even she had to admit that she really needed a break. And now Yacho convinced her to go shopping. She originally refused, intending to go to Naruto, but Yacho had used the one trump that always worked. Gecko hate. Now she was looking around, checking which clothes Gecko would most likely like to see her in. She'd make it up to Naruto somehow. Probably by inviting him to ramen, he'd forgive everything if you did that. Yashu's face was split by a grin of pure evil, hidden behind his mask. Well, he had not lost anyone in the attack, he utterly despised demons. They didn't belong in this world, it was made for humans, not that filth that littered it. So he volunteered when the question who should distract Yugao's attention away from the fox brat that was parading itself right under his nose. He had worked together with Yugao on a few missions, so she hadn't suspected anything when he had convinced her to take a day off. Every one of the Watchers' distractions had worked with their targets and developed loose friendships that had been an important criteria for who had been chosen. By now, the well-organized mob should have cornered the fox. It was a shame he couldn't join the hunt, but some sacrifices had to be made. And the mob had indeed managed to corner Naruto. He had managed to hide Gama-chan, but unfortunately there hadn't been enough time to hide himself, and every path leading to the forest where the nice Ni-chan was living had been blocked. There were not as many people in this mob, only around 40, but there were a lot more ninja amongst them, including a black-haired Anbu with a lion mask. They had proceeded to beat him nearly senseless, then they dragged him to a distant part of the village where nobody could hear him scream. Then they started making him scream. Anko was getting worried. Naruto had yet to show, and he was never late. The boy had sharp instincts and knew when to make a break for it. But what if he couldn't come? That thought alone was more than enough to make her look for him. And on the rear end of the village, she found a man that was stacking wood and pouring oil over it. Well, stacking wood was not a rare occurrence here in the Leaf, soaking it with oil in an old, abandoned plaza certainly was. And the man kept mumbling to himself. Anko's heart stopped when she listened to what he said. The others are having all the fun with the demon, but that doesn't matter. In the end, they'll bring the pieces here, and I get to be the one who lights the fire that will finally release Konoha and the world from the damned fox. Realization hit Anko. The man was building a pyre. Not even 2 seconds later, the man found himself stuck headfirst in the middle of his own pyre, just as it spontaneously ignited and was ablaze in seconds. Anko didn't wait until the man started screaming before she ran, now frantically searching. Meanwhile, a small girl named Ichiruwasi was upset. Her parents had told her something important would be going on today, so the festival wouldn't start until dusk. She couldn't understand why, it had always started in the early afternoon. It was probably because they had forgotten. If that was the case, all she had to do was remind everyone that today was not a work day. She found some fireworks and set them up the same way she'd seen her father do it. Just as she was about to light them, her mother stepped outside. "Ichiru, where are why no don't?" But it was too late. The small rocket shot into the air before exploding in a mixture of colors with a loud boom. Ichiru looked at her mother, confused by her shout. Nothing had happened, right? Slap. Her mother had hit her. Ichiru didn't understand why, but her mother said something about her ruining everything. But what had she done wrong? As soon as the better firecracker had come into sight, 8 heads had snapped towards it. The exact same thoughts were in the heads of Itachi, Kakashi, Tenzo and Yugao. Firework. Why would someone light a 4 faces lost all color, the Kyuubi festival? Naruto. In 4 different heads a single thought was found when they saw the recognition in the faces of the ones they were supposed to keep away from the demon fox. Shit. With that, they jumped in the way of the Watchers, who had just begun to dash. "Shisui, I have something important to do, so please get out of my way," Itachi said, not quite understanding why his best friend had stopped him. Shisui shook his head. "Sorry, but I can't. A lot of people would be beyond pissed if you came." Itachi's thoughts were going a mile a minute, so it only took him a few seconds to understand what was going on. Somebody had arranged another attack on Naruto, and if they had kept him distracted and away from Naruto, they probably had done the same with all others who were supposed to watch him. That meant that Naruto needed him now more than ever. He became completely calm. It was the same calm that took hold of him in the war or when he was in a mission as an Anbu. All he saw was his objective, namely saving Naruto, and a hindrance to said objective. And hindrances were to be removed. His voice was like ice. "Shisui, get out of my way, or I will use lethal force. You have 3 seconds. One could see even through the face mask how Kakashi's face twisted in ungodly rage as he understood. "You filthy traitorous little rat. How dare you? You have 3 seconds to get as far away from here as possible. If you're still here by then, I'll kill you." "Come on Tenzo, you wouldn't really attack a comrade for the sake of some demon that killed our great leader, the Yondaime, would you?" Usagi asked. Tenzo's eyes held no emotion. "You are standing between an Anbu and his objective. I don't think I have to tell you what that means. As for comradeship, you have 3 seconds to move before I remove you." Yacho knew Yuigao well enough to immediately grab her when she tried to get past him. Oh no you don't. The filthy demon will get what he deserves today, and you understand that we can't let anything stop us from doing the world such a favor. She looked at her former comrade, disgust and hatred in her eyes as she kicked him in the chest, forcing him to let go. You swine. How dare you? He's just an innocent child. Get out of my way in 3 seconds or I'll turn you into bacon. All four had given the ultimatum at the same time and their targets reacted in the same way. None of them moved and all of them used the exact same arguments to talk them out of it. You wouldn't really kill me just to save the little hell spawn. 3. Was the only reply. You're bluffing. We're comrades. 2. 4 pairs of hands started forming hand signs. You can't be serious. After all we've been through together. 1. You're mad. Even if you kill us, you'll never find him. And even if, you can't just kill all who took part in this noble mission. Time's up. Shisui's eyes widened. Itachi had finished and muttered Suiton. Kiga no Kiri. Before dashing at Shisui and passing him, so close that their lips almost touched. Shisui again jumped in Itachi's way, laughing. I knew you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't hurt your best friend just to save the demigurgle. Shisui stopped talking when he noticed that water was flowing out of his mouth. He tried to inhale, but his lungs were completely filled with water. He tried to cough it out, but his lungs refilled faster than he could release the water. He could even see how some of the smaller drops he hurled out stopped falling and flied back into his mouth. He then saw Itachi dashing away, and despite knowing both what had hit him and how to solve it, he made the wrong decision by going after his friend. Itachi jumped over the river and Shisui tried to do the same. But drowning on dry land had taken a toll on his body, not to mention that the lack of oxygen paired with the fear of death made it impossible to have the precise chakra control required for water walking. Instead of landing on the other side like Itachi, he landed right in the middle of the river, submerging. Itachi's eyes widened. The jutsu he used was designed to drown its victim by attracting any and all water in the surrounding area to itself in seconds, that usually meant using the humidity. Should someone in Shisui's state land in water, no matter if in a pond, a lake, a river or the ocean, he was doomed. Colder water would continuously flow into the lungs, forcing the mist down, even if fire chakra was gathered in the lungs to force it out. Shisui would drown. It was a grotesque view. The water of the river flowed into his mouth, then his nose, before finally covering his entire face, blurring his features and veiling his terrified expression. Itachi felt a tear run down his cheek, then as Shisui's lifeless body sunk to the riverbed, stinging pain emerged in Itachi's eyes, before fading as fast as it had come. Itachi made a mental note to figure out what was wrong with his eyes, but right now, he had more important things to do. He turned away from Shisui's watery grave and jumped over the roofs, trying to find Naruto. Kakashi's hand was covered in lightning, surpassed only by the malice seen in his eye. You had your chance, you wasted it. Now die. Rikiri. Izumi never had a chance to even make an attempt to dodge. The last thing he saw in his life was a flash of lightning. The blow had been aimed to the left side of his face, and it tore through the mask as if it was made of paper, obliterating nearly the entire left section of his head, including his nose, left eye, left ear, and roughly 2/3 of his upper and lower jaw. Kakashi had intentionally aimed a little to the left so he wouldn't waste time pulling his hand out of Nizumi's skull and ran forward without sparing the corpse a single glance as it fell, and what was left of the brain slid out of the head and landed on the ground. He didn't stop running when he sliced his finger and summoned his dogs. Find Naruto. He ordered. Akin took the time to look at Kakashi, the blood on him and the corpse. That won't be easy, Konoha is big and the boy has been nearly everywhere. Kakashi looked at him. I don't care, find him. Akin sighed. This is bad, isn't it? You have no idea. Kakashi muttered. Then the dogs were gone, searching for the freshest trail to lead them to the boy. Yuigao jumped into the air before announcing her jutsu kaiten. Kyoryu Enden. The flames hit Yacho, who had been too startled to dodge, from a high angle, burning his hands, the lower arms he had extended to form hand signs of his own, his legs and part of his lower torso, which to Yuigao's extreme satisfaction, included the man's jewels. Outfitting swine, you're bacon. Say hello to Ibiki for me. She mocked, before leaving him laying on the ground to search for Naruto. Tenzo looked at his, in his opinion former, comrade as he clasped his hands in the typical hand sign for Mokuton and spoke Mokuton. Jubaku Aisu. Before Yasagi had a chance to react, roots broke through the floor and bound her, leaving her unable to move. She considered cutting or burning herself free, but Tenzo seemed to read her mind. If I were you, and I thank God that I'm not, I wouldn't try anything funny. This jutsu usually drags its victim beneath the earth and crushes it there, but I found a way to have that effect delayed. Now it only activates when there is damage done to the roots. And Kamawari doesn't work in this. The only way to release this jutsu without killing you is either knowing Mokuton or having a special seal. There are two, one of them is in Hokage-sama's possession. Isagi looked annoyed. And the other one? For a moment, she thought she saw a smirk appearing on his face when he answered. Ibiki. She paled. I have more important things to do, so farewell. But that, he was gone. Scattered within the leaf, 5 people were desperately trying to find one blonde boy. Suddenly, all 5 felt a chill run down their spines and they did something completely against their training. They started shouting for Naruto, hoping that the boy would answer. They knew it was a race against time and the clock was ticking fast. The self-proclaimed saviors of Konoha looked up from their gruel work as the rocket popped. Naruto was nailed to the wall by a large collection of blades, both arms already removed after all pain receptors had been destroyed by the torture. The crowd saw the fireworks as the village celebrating them, but one of them realized it would also call the hounds on them. Their gaze was locked to the point where the rocket popped, but one of them threw kunai at the point he knew the boy was. He felt an immense joy when he heard the sound of sharp steel penetrating flesh. What happened next was the last thing anyone had expected. Filling intent washed over them, so strong that even the civilians felt it as they were forced to their knees. When they managed to turn their heads, they saw the demon standing there, the blades no longer in the body, eyes crimson and slitted. An insane chuckle was heard as the boy looked at them and spoke with a voice that terrified all that heard it. Finally. Chapter 3. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. Speaking shouting. Thinking. Summon Biju. Hashirama. Madara. Minato. Jutsu. The villagers, who had been momentarily distracted by the firework, turned around to see that instead of the weak demon brat they had nailed to the tree without arms, what was now in front of them was physically the same, but an aura of dread overcame those who looked at him. They had cut the birthmarks open, so it was impossible to see if they had deepened, but the eyes were now crimson and slitted. Then this creature before them opened his mouth and a dark laughter escaped before he started to speak. Finally. After 7 long years I can finally move in the physical world again. Such a shame that it's only temporary. One of the villagers mustered all his courage. You finally show your true self, demon. And what are you talking about after 7 years? You've been taunting us with your cursed smile every day. Tonight you die. Naruto, or rather what had possessed him, spoke. Fool. I will not die in the night, but in the light of the sun, the very ashes of the world in my lungs when all else has long since perished. And sadly, your Hokage was a lot better than I would have liked. I am sealed in this boy, and as long as his consciousness dominates his body, I'm unable to do anything, trapped like a rat. Fortunately for me, you fools have tortured him until he had to retreat to the deepest corners of his mind to avoid mentally breaking. Even I would not easily find him now, not that I want to. It's a real shame that you couldn't break him, that would have allowed me permanent control. Couldn't you puny maggots have tried a little harder? While he spoke those words, red chakra bubbled out of the stumps where his arms had been and formed a good imitation as the rest of his wounds healed in seconds. Slowly, bones started to form while the flesh grew from the shoulders to cover it. It would take a few minutes, but then the arms would be good as new. Many of the villagers paled at the thought that if what this thing said was true, the boy would have to possess immense mental strength to keep up that long. And now the villagers had gotten their wish. The boy was gone, at least for now. But his absence had unleashed the very beast they had tried to punish and destroy. But as humans have enormous problems with guilt, they simply declared it as the damned fox trying to mess with their minds. One member of the mob stepped forwards to face the Kyuubi. It was an Anbu wearing a lion mask. Silence, monster. You can't deceive us. Kaiten. Kikaku no Jutsu. Kyuubi merely raised a hand of his red chakra as the fireball hit. Shishi, lion, smirked. Go to hell, fox. In there, it was rather boring. Came the reply. Everyone stared as they saw the fireball shrinking in size as it was absorbed into the hand. Kyuubi's eyes filled with something akin to pity. We Biju are beings of pure chakra, do you honestly believe that sending such pathetic amounts of chakra at us would hurt? All you're doing is pouring a cup of water into an endless ocean. The Anbu removed his mask and revealed black hair and the Sharingan. I am of the Uchiha clan, demon. That trick of yours doesn't impress me. For a second, Shishi thought he heard a low growl at the word Uchiha, but the Kyuubi Naruto's face was impassive as he tilted his head. Maybe my next one will be more impressive. For my next trick I'll make your head disappear. Before anyone had a chance to react, Kyuubi was standing in front of Shishi, left chakra hand on his face. The hand seemed to have grown a bit as it covered the man's entire head. Kyuubi pushed forward, and with a sizzling noise, the head evaporated as Kyuubi was already gone, leaning on a tree on the opposite side of where he had started. One of the Chunin shouted brother. But Kyuubi ignored him and merely looked at his arms. The bones had completely formed, but the flesh had only crawled to the middle of his upper arms. A different ninja jumped at him, kunai in a reverse grip to slit his throat. Kyuubi raised its hand and the blade connected with it instead of the unprotected artery. The man stared in disbelief at the molten stump of metal that was left of the kunai before hissing in pain as some of the slowly hardening metal burned his hand. They looked at the Kyuubi, expecting amusement or that pity-resembling look, but what they saw terrified them. Kyuubi's face was distorted in ungodly rage. He grabbed the attacker's face, but he didn't evaporate it. "You miserable flesh bag." He spoke. "You dare attack me? You pitiful speck of dust dare raise your hand against me, Kyuubi no Kitsune, the greatest of the nine. I thought I made it crystal clear that any mortal attacking me will die, but I'm more than willing to freshen the message." But that his right hand, which was not holding the man, formed something that could be an unknown hand sign, and a pulse of red energy passed through the arm and into the man's face. Kyuubi released the man who dropped to the floor, screaming in agony. "What have you done to him?" a random villager shouted. Kyuubi smiled. "Unlike chakra, a demon's yaki can undergo many changes. I won't bore you with details, but when a demon is filled with anger, rage or hatred, it transforms into malice, which is the deadliest form of yaki. As you've seen, it can melt steel on touch, and when injected into an organism that is not its creator, as I have done, it reacts rather violently." Violently turned out to be the understatement of the century. The man was squirming on the ground, screaming in agony as his eyes liquefied and his teeth fell out, reddish goo seeping out the holes where they had once been. His limbs seemed to stop thrashing as they started to bend in ways they were not supposed to. The entire human shape seemed to melt as his skin bubbled. Kyuubi was apparently so proud of his work that he saw fit to explain. "I've worked very hard to get my malice to do to organisms what I wanted it to. Now that it's perfected, it dissolves his entire body, his bones, muscles, flesh, inner organs and all that stuff. There are 5 things that will dissolve only after all else is gone. His brain, his heart, his lungs, his pain receptors and his vocal cords." One of the mobsters looked at him, eyes filled with hatred as the malice's victim's muscles liquefied, making him unable to squirm, although he could still scream. "I understand brain, heart and lungs stay intact so he lives as long as possible, and the nerve endings remain because you're not only a filthy demon, but a sadistic bastard. But why the vocal cords?" Kyuubi's eyes filled with evil glee. "Isn't it obvious? So I can hear him scream." As the man finally died, Kyuubi's chakra had finished regenerating both arms. He looked at the mob. "Now that the arms are back, I have one question before I rip you all to shreds. If you truly believed that this pathetic vessel was me, why did you attack?" The other Uchiha spat out. "Isn't obvious, you monster. You don't deserve to live." Kyuubi rolled his eyes. "Idiot. I wasn't asking about your obviously non-existing morals, I was asking whatever made you believe that you weaklings would stand a snowball's chance in hell to kill me. In case you've forgotten, I played bowling with your head 7 years ago, and I wasn't even using my tail's powers. If I can cause tsunamis and crumble mountains with but a flick of my tails, what made you think that it would have been beyond my power to annihilate your village? No, had I wanted to, I could have wiped this village from the map before it even appeared on the horizon." It made some villagers think. The demon had a point, it had crushed their best ninja 7 years ago, as if he was crushing ants. Even if weakened, such a demon would not have accepted their treatment all these years. They had just witnessed what he was capable of, and had the fox been in control, rivers of blood would have been spilled long ago. But the fox's words left one question open. "If you could have crushed us so easily, why didn't you?" The grin flashed over Kyuubi Naruto's face. 2 reasons. First, Konoha was not my target, I was merely passing through and only killed those who attacked me. As I've proven, I will painfully destroy those who dare raise their hand against me. That's bullshit. My brother attacked you and you seemed amused, not angered. The Uchiha shouted. Kyuubi looked surprised. That was supposed to be an attack. I thought he was giving me his chakra as a sacrifice. A collective sweat drop fell before Kyuubi spoke again. Anyways, the other reason I physically attacked your village instead of blasting it to oblivion or releasing my malice and watch you die of, let's call it chakra poisoning, which in hindsight would have been better, is very simple. It was more fun. Now, how shall I kill you all? The entire mob tensed, but then something unexpected happened. Kyuubi Naruto stumbled backwards, clutching his face as if he had received a particularly nasty uppercut. Then he cursed as his free hand was clawing the air, as if trying to swat away a horde of wasps. Shit. I had hoped you would take longer to awaken. Things were just getting interesting, and now that the arms are healed, you just want to take over? I don't care that you're the most powerful ninjas this pathetic village had ever had, this is not fair, I was deprived of all joy and freedom for far too long. But the red slowly faded from Naruto's eyes, replaced by black. Fine, you win. But did you? Before you make a hasty decision, let me show you what these people did to our host. Once we have more time, I'll show you the rest of his life. I'm sure you all will find it most enlightening, especially you, Yondaime. But for now, view his last 10 minutes. The last growl, then the red, slitted pupils, had been replaced by normal black eyes. For a second there was warmth in these eyes, then confusion, then rage. He spoke, but the voice was completely different. This is not what I wanted the leaf to become when I founded it. I desired peace, not for the villagers to band together in order to torture children. I won't stand by and watch you stain what I and others worked so hard to create. You all are a disgrace to Konoha. The mob wondered what the hell was going on. Suddenly the beast that had wanted to kill them had been forced back, shouting something about Konoha's greatest ninjas and the Yondaime. But the Yondaime couldn't be sealed in Naruto, could he? But who was this person, talking about Konoha as if he was the impossible? But it was possible. None of you will escape here. Mokuten. Kanyukuru no Jutsu. And as some of the smarter mobsters feared, a tree grew out of the ground next to the headless Uchiha, its branches quickly wrapping around them all and pulled them close together. And even as they tried to escape, they realized that the branches were too tight to wriggle free and too thick to be broken. But one of the elder members shouted. Shadaime-sama. How have you become trapped within the demon? And why are you doing this to us, who merely tried to kill it once and for all? The black eyes darkened. Just like Madara, I was devoured by the Kyuubi. When it was sealed, I, together with him, was released from the beasts inside and became one of the guardians who assure that the Kyuubi remains behind bars. And before your foolish actions, there was no need for us to even awaken, as the Kyuubi had no way of taking control. But your actions have nearly led to the destruction of the leaf, and that I cannot forgive. But, I'm not your executioner. He closed his eyes. Before he opened them again, the Uchiha shouted, wait a second, I'll burn us out. But one of the men knew enough about trees to deduce what they were tangled in. No, no fire. This is an inferno oak. That type of tree has oil flowing through it like a human's blood system. One cut and we're soaked in oil. And it is said that a single spark is enough to set an entire forest of these ablaze. If you use fire, we'll all be cremated. A low chuckle escaped Naruto's throat as he opened his eyes, the Sharingan swirling in them. That's right. Hashirama developed this technique just to imprison Uchihas. And I can assure you it works perfectly. And what have we here? One of the traitorous Uchiha clan. I wonder, after you've betrayed me, has your life gotten better? Or was I right and the once proud Uchihas have been reduced to lapdogs? Is the next conspiracy already planned, this time against Konoha? I can assure you that it's too late for that now, you should have joined me when you had the chance. The Uchiha paled, realizing that he was talking to his ancestor, who had correctly deduced their plans, even though he had no way of knowing what had happened in the last decades, the great Madara Uchiha. A dark smile flashed over Naruto's face. In the flesh. Well, not exactly, but you get the idea. But, I've wasted enough time chatting. He walked to the corpse of the man dissolved by Kyuubi's malice that was really only held together by the skin. He gave it a kick and it shot towards the tree, where it popped like a balloon once it hit the bark, showering those held by the tree in liquefied remains. Madara closed his eyes, and when they opened again, the eternal Mangekyo had replaced them. Well then young Uchiha, he said, this is where we say farewell. But don't worry, you're not going alone. All these people will join you on your journey into the void, and the rest of your traitorous clan will follow you soon enough. Kamui. And in the center of the tree, space collapsed, sucking everything in the area of effect inside of it. When Madara Naruto's eyes closed again, the only evidence that anything had ever happened was a crater. But when the eyes opened, they were in Naruto's vibrant sky blue, but with a seriousness in them that Naruto never had. He sighed. This is not what I wanted to happen. I can only hope these were the exception, and that the other villagers see him as a hero. But that, he vanished in a yellow flash, only seconds before an Anbu noticed the crater and called for backup. Naruto's body suddenly found itself at the bottom of a small lake, a rusted three-pronged kunai on the ground in front of him. So that's where it went. Minato thought to himself as he swam to the surface. He was at the shore of a lake in the forest, close to the village. The river flowing through the village was next to him as its waters joined with the lake. Minato remembered that this was the same lake that Gamabunta had jumped into to wash him off when he got the summoning contract for toads. Suddenly his knees buckled and he fell to the ground. Minato mentally shrugged, he wasn't surprised. The three of them had just squeezed more chakra out of Naruto than most ninja use in their lives, till they make jounin. Now all he and the others could do was try to find Naruto in the depths of his mind while keeping the fox at bay, as he was the only one that could flood the empty chakra paths and take control, even if only temporarily. He started to search as Naruto's body lost consciousness. To her immense relief, Yu Gao found Naruto safe and sound, sleeping at the shore of the lake closest to Konoha. The boy must have had a run-in with those foolish villagers, as there were cuts and dried blood on his clothes, but he looked unharmed. Once again, she mentally thanked whatever force was responsible, probably the yondaime, for arranging that the fox's power healed Naruto faster. Her guess was that he tried to reach Anko, but was blocked by a mob. He somehow managed to escape and snuck out of the village while he still could. But Yuigao knew that there were a few ninja amongst the mobs and that she may not be enough to take care of them all. She had to make a choice, and she did, hoping that her allies were the faster ones. Pain. The Kauden no Jutsu. A fireball shot into the sky, where it formed a blazing spiral that lasted 10 seconds, 8 more than it was supposed to, and vanished. Yuigao took Naruto and moved closer to the water. Potential enemies would have to pass the entire shore, so Yuigao would see them coming, and if someone tried to come over the lake, the splashing would give him away long before he got close. When the spiral formed, 4 heads had snapped towards it, closely followed by their bodies. All 4 had been praying for some sort of sign of Naruto, and they got it. But the mobs also saw the signal flare and were heading in the same direction. All 4 knew that whoever fired the flare was on Naruto's side and either expecting a charge and wishing for support or already under attack. 4 pair of feet suddenly kicked into a higher gear that was close to breaking the sound barrier as their owners ran to where they hoped Naruto would be. Yuigao was getting worried. She could hear a number of people stampeding through the forest, and a second ago, they had broken through the foliage, murder in their eyes. There were at least 50 and a few ninja amongst them. Nothing she couldn't handle under normal circumstances, but she had to protect Naruto. To her immense relief, 4 people appeared besides her and Anko, Kakashi, Itachi and Tenzo were standing beside her, forming a protective circle around the unconscious boy. Kakashi spoke first. "Go home people, there's nothing to see here. We are ordered to protect Naruto with usage of lethal force, should we deem it necessary, and trust me, we deem it necessary if someone gets closer than 12 feet or starts throwing something." The mob seemed to hesitate. Anko spoke. "I want all you bastards gone in 10 seconds, or your snake food." One of the mobsters sneered. "What makes you think you can order us around, snake bitch?" Anko looked at Tenzo. "Can you keep them stationary for a few seconds? I want to sacrifice them to Manda, and it'd be a pain if they ran away." That had an instant effect as the mob fled in wild panic. All 5 guardians waited a few minutes, then they turned to look at Naruto. Kakashi broke the silence. "He's probably completely exhausted. We should bring him to the hospital. I know a few doctors and nurses like him and actually didn't take the day off in case something like this happened." The others nodded and carefully hoisted Naruto on Anko's shoulders while the others took a square formation around her to block possible attacks from all sides as they sprinted towards the hospital. Naruto's body reported that it felt the warmth of laying in a bed, surrounded by people that cared about him and weren't trying to kill him. That unconsciously caused Naruto to return out of the depths of his mind, but instead of waking up, he had found himself in a sewer. At first he thought the mob had thrown him here, but then he noticed that this one was unlike any sewer he had seen before, and he knew all sewers of Konoha like the back of his hand, having to hide there from mobs and people pissed by his pranks. He continued walking until he reached a big hall. On the other side, he could see a giant gate with a tag that had the kanji for seal on it. As he walked closer, he could see that to his left, a tree started to grow, only much faster than a tree should grow. When it had reached a size of 50 feet, it stopped growing as a hole opened in the middle of the bark, revealing a hollow space, similar to a cave. In the cave, he could see a shadowy figure in a lotus position, looking down at him with black eyes. He could only see the silhouette and the eyes. Then red light from above caught his attention. He looked to see a blood-red moon raising to a full moon in a way surprisingly similar to an eye opening. When the moon was full, black fire seemed to break out around it and gathered on the bottom as the eye moon closed. When it was barely more than a fine line, the fire dripped down like a tear, hitting the wet floor with a hissing sound as the water evaporated and the black fire broke out once more, another silhouetted person sitting inside of the fire. He seemed to have something on his back and the eyes were red, with a circle with 3 rings in it and 3 bars connecting the ring to the edge of the iris, you know what it looks like. He was sitting in a more relaxed position, one leg on the floor like with a lotus position, but the other leg was standing on the ground, the knee with the left arm leaning on it pointing to the heavens. As Naruto still tried to digest what had happened, pale fire seemed to appear everywhere. They were not bigger than the fire of a candle, but they seemed to gather right in the middle, between the black flames and the tree. As they gathered, a third silhouette appeared within them. He was also in a lotus position, and his sky blue eyes and the shape of his hair seemed familiar to Naruto. "Who are you?" Naruto asked. A smirk from all 3. The one in the tree spoke first. "We are the guardians of the seal. The Shinigami himself put us in this position." The one in the black flames chuckled. "We were once human like you, only much stronger. Due to different circumstances, we all ended up in a particularly obscure ceiling, where the Shinigami found us and put us here." The third one shrugged. "We woke from our slumber a few minutes ago when you blacked out." The one in the tree spoke again. But perhaps we should introduce ourselves with our real names. He stepped out of the tree and Naruto could clearly see him now. My name is Hashirama Senju, but you may know me as the Shodaime Hokage. Naruto's eyes widened. The one in the black flames stood up and left his burning throne. When I was alive, I was known as Madara Uchiha, the most powerful Uchiha of all times, and our clan is very old. Finally, the third one jumped out of the pale fire. And I am Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto couldn't keep himself from staring. These almost mythical people were inside of his head. He tried to decide what to ask first. Finally, he made a decision. You said you guard a seal inside of me, but what is this seal sealing? The voice was like a thunder, and Naruto looked for the source. He noticed there were things swishing around in the darkness of the cage. It looked like snakes, only much bigger. Then a red glow seemed to slowly illuminate the interior of the cage, revealing the biggest thing Naruto had ever seen. What he thought were snakes were really the tails of a giant fox. It seemed to be bound. Look at the picture showing all 9 Biju. Kyuubi looks like in that picture, only not in a crater, but then he raised his head and released a roar that would make the strongest of men tremble in terror, and it had. Naruto gulped, then he looked at all 4. You're all show-offs. 4 grins answered him as he continued. I'm guessing that's the Kyuubi no Kitsune, if the 9 tails are any indication, but why isn't it dead, and how did it get inside of me? Kyuubi laughed. You're smarter than I thought. Indeed, I am the great Kyuubi no Kitsune. As for why I'm here, we Biju cannot be killed by any means, but in fight for our title. The Yondaime here did the next best thing and sealed me inside of an infant whose chakra coils weren't fully developed yet and therefore able to adapt to my Yaki. The poor fool wished for the child to be seen as a hero, but I don't need to tell you how that worked out. Guess who the lucky infant is? Naruto stared at the Yondaime. It's your fault. Because of what you did I had to go through all that, why me? There must have been other children that were an option, so why me? Minato squirmed but remained silent. Kyuubi smirked. Either you tell him or I do. Minato bit his lip, then he gave in. Naruto, there was a reason. I was the Hokage then, and as such I couldn't demand from others what I wasn't willing to do myself. I couldn't ask another family to give up their child when what I'm trying to say is, you're my son. Naruto froze like a statue. Minato was slowly getting worried. He had expected anything from jumping in joy to yelling at him, but not that he would remain as still as a statue. Then Naruto finally spoke. I see. I guess that makes sense. I won't hold your decision against you, but I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive you, Minato Namikaze. With that, he vanished into the real world where the other 4 could not follow. Minato stood there, as unmoving as Naruto had been seconds before. He could not believe how much it hurt to hear one's own son calling him by his full name, showing he was not viewing him as his father. Madara and Hashirama had decided to remain quiet as they really couldn't understand what was going on. Kyuubi had less decency. You know, I've been looking forward to this ever since I found out that you were in here. Revenge is so sweet. Sadist. Minato muttered. Kyuubi raised a brow. I burn half your village to the ground, kill everyone who stands in my way with my bare hands, liquefy a person who's fully aware of what's happening to him, and you realize that now? You're pretty dense. Minato sighed. Can you show me his life? The other 2 looked up, interested in that as well. Knowing your landlord was never wrong. Kyuubi grinned, and something about that smile gave Minato a very bad feeling about what he'd see. I thought you'd never ask. Chapter 4. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. Speaking shouting. Thinking. Summon Biju. Hashirama. Madara. Minato. Jutsu. Naruto slowly opened his eyes. He was no longer inside of his mind, but out in the real world. He was laying in a hospital bed, surrounded by the 6 people he'd blindly trust his life to. Now he felt an important part of him, which had still remained hidden in the corners of his mind when he met the Kyuubi and his jailers, finally emerge. His cheerful nature. He spoke. Okijiji, Itachi Niasen, Kakashi Niasen, Yugao Nisan, Tenzo Niasen, Anko Nisan, nice to see you. How have you been? And why are you looking at me like that? The Sandaime raised a brow and looked at the 4 Anbu, who, after exchanging a surprised look with each other, had suddenly developed a fascination with the tips of their shoes. They all had broken an important protocol when they guarded him, namely giving away their identities. Each one had also spent parts of their private time with the sun-kissed boy, inviting him to ramen and such. But instead of reminding them of the Anbu protocol and giving out punishment, as the law told him to, the Sandaime merely smiled at them and made a mental note to give them a raise. Anko chuckled, being the first to regain her speech. We had to peel you out of your bloody clothes and you ask how we are doing. That's rich, brat. Naruto jumped up and down on his bed. Don't call me brat. He shouted, much to the amusement of the others. Then the Sandaime, Sarutobi, became serious. Naruto, do you remember what happened to you? he asked, the others looking at Naruto as well. Naruto frowned in concentration, which made him rather cute in the eyes of the present ladies. Then he shook his head. Nope. All I remember is running away, hiding Gama-chan, and waking up here. Gama-chan? Anko asked. The Hokage sighed. It's his purse, shaped like a frog. I gave it to him as a present. He explained. Anko nodded, it makes sense. Hide your cash, or you risk losing it. Being a pariah of sorts herself, it had happened to her, at least until she started building a reputation as being bloodthirsty to the point of insanity. But Sarutobi was worried. One of his Anbu had reported that in one of the old plazas, one of the few sections that were deemed too expensive to repair after the Kyuubi attack and had been abandoned was gone, a giant crater taking its place. But nothing gave any hints on what had caused the crater. There had been no explosion, and no traces of chakra could be detected. It was a mystery. Had one asked Madara, he could have explained that the Kamui he had used not only sent the tree plus mob and ground to a different dimension, something that was impossible to survive, as the shift ripped everything apart molecule by molecule, but also sucked in air and all chakra residue, effectively erasing not only all physical evidence, but also the leftover Yauki of the Kyuubi. Inside of Naruto's mind, the three great warriors that held the Kyuubi at bay had just finished watching Naruto's life, which was just a focused mass of abuse, neglect and torture, peaking into a single attempt of suicide. To say they were shocked would be an understatement, they were horrified. All three had seen many ugly things on the battlefield, but this took the cake. Madara pulled himself together first. I seem to have forgotten, please refresh my memory. He said, sarcasm dripping from his words. Burning Konoha to the ground was bad, why? Kyuubi looked up, a slight grin on its face. I second that question. Hashirama and Minato remained silent before the founder of the village in question spoke. I am beginning to ask myself the same question. Not even in my worst nightmares would I have expected something like this to occur. Madara nodded. When the village was formed, I had asked where all our mutual hatred had gone, consider my question answered. Minato was still silent, unable to comprehend what could have gone wrong. He had asked for Naruto to be seen as a hero, how had it turned to this? Kishino always told me I was too trusting, I should have listened to her. He muttered before turning away from the cage. What are you doing? Kyuubi asked. Minato didn't look up. I need a drink. A strong one. Kyuubi snorted, sending small waves trough the water. Good luck with that, this is a sower. Minato shook his head. Wrong, this is a mindscape. And with that, he held out his hands and a bar rose out of the ground. Hashirama and Madara looked at each other, then they extended their hands to grab the sake-filled cups that had appeared. With a nod, they gulped it down. Kyuubi blinked. Could it really be that easy? He focused and tried to make a change he had wished for the last 7 years and howled in frustration as nothing happened. Madara smirked. It looks like being a warden does have some advantages over being a prisoner. Shut up. Kyuubi growled. Minato was looking through the bar. Sake. Not strong enough. Wine. Not much better. What's this? Vodka. Never heard of it. He checked the label. 87% alcohol. Sounds right. With that, he put the bottle to his lips and drank. Madara raised a brow. We're technically dead, can we even get drunk? Hashirama shrugged. We're in a mindscape, so I guess we can get drunk if we want to. Though I don't think we can die of alcohol poisoning or anything else. Beside the kid's untimely passing, which is not as unlikely as it may sound at first. Madara muttered. Naruto was sitting on his hospital bed, sulking. Despite his best efforts, Akinagang, the Hokage had insisted that he'd stay the night. Well, that may not be such a bad thing, seeing that his apartment was probably in shambles by now. He hated the hospital, not because of the shots or the doctors and nurses, most of them were nice to him. He hated it because he could hear the patients getting visits, he could see parents with their children, and sometimes even a few grandfathers through the window. It hurt him inside to see them all getting cared for while he was all alone. Then he remembered that that wasn't quite true anymore. He had a father, and he could speak to him. In hindsight, he wondered what had been wrong with him when he first met his father. Even though he didn't know it, what had been wrong with him was the fact that most of his personality had still been hidden, and the only parts of him that had emerged into that chamber were his logic and his memories, most of which were rather bitter ones, leading the logic to the conclusion that his father had caused suffering. But now that Naruto's mind was complete, he felt rather bad for his harsh words and wanted to apologize. That, so much was undisputed amongst those that really knew him, was one of Naruto's great qualities. He was always willing to forgive, and he considered every stranger as a potential friend until he'd been proven otherwise. A joke running amongst those that liked him was that you could cut his arm off and he'd forgive you if you treated him to ramen. Of course, now such a crippling would only be temporary. But back to our story. Naruto had decided to apologize and was now at a very important question. How? He didn't know how to get back to the place where he had met his father and the other three. He decided to just go to sleep and hope he'd get an idea in his sleep, which would turn out to be the right idea. Sarutobi sighed. Apparently a group of villagers had vanished right about the time that crater had been discovered. What made matters worse was that amongst the missing, there were 2 Uchihas, one of them in Anbu. That made it Sarutobi's responsibility to find out what happened, but so far, he had no luck. Of course, the council, at least the civilians, seemed to know exactly what had happened. Okajama, you cannot allow that the demon lives after what it has just done. We lost almost 50 citizens and shinobi, amongst them an Anbu. Sarutobi sighed. Lost is the right word, seeing as there is no trace of them. Also nobody has seen any of them in the last 24 hours, so I have to assume that they have been missing since that time. Do you have any proof or even witnesses that say Naruto did something to these people? Many civilians felt like giving themselves a kick, their tactic had backfired. Many in the population were against Naruto and knew of the mobs that usually gathered to kill him, therefore they always said that they hadn't seen anyone on such days when questioned. Now that same tactic worked against them, giving the little hellspawn an alibi. And if anyone changed his opinion, he'd be considered a liar, seeing that he'd be giving 2 conflicting statements. Yugaku, to everyone's surprise, agreed. I don't know what happened, but I doubt that Naruto Uzumaki has anything to do with it. He wouldn't have the skill to defeat an Anbu, much less if 50 people backed him up. In reality, he simply saw it as impossible that the demon could defeat an Uchiha even close to the level of the missing ones. The Hokage nodded. I shall inform you all if we find a trace of them. But until then, meeting Aj. But before Heckled finished the sentence, a messenger burst through the door, panting. Hokage-sama, it's terrible. We have just found the body of Shisui Uchiha. Yugaku jumped up. What? He jumped up and grabbed the messenger by the throat. Where is he? Sarutobi grabbed his shoulder. Calm down, we can't do anything right now. And please let the messenger go. Begrudgingly, Yugaku dropped the man. What is the cause of death? He asked, forcing himself to be calm. The messenger coughed, then he spoke. Apparently, he drowned. We found no traces of violence on the body, but without an autopsy, it's impossible to determine what exactly happened. However, to make an autopsy on the member of a clan, we need the permission of the clan leader. Permission granted. I want to know exactly what happened. Fugaku growled before storming out. Sarutobi sighed. Meeting adjourned. He said and left the council room. Minato had just finished his 2nd bottle of vodka, and you could clearly see it. His face was crimson, and he muttered nonsense in a melancholic voice. The others were looking at him, but they were unsure what to do with him. Finally, Kyuubi sighed. You are taking this way too seriously. If I know that brat, he'll be here soon to apologize. I have yet to see an occasion where the boy wasn't willing to forgive after a short while. He just needs to cool off, then he'll be jumping in joy about his mighty dad. That had an amazing effect on Minato. His face took its normal color, and all signs of drowsiness practically slid off of him. He started glancing around, as if waiting for his son to appear. Madara raised a brow. Since when do you cheer people up? I'd have expected you to milk this for all it's worth, especially if what you said is really true. Kyuubi let out another deep sigh. Normally I would enjoy him looking like a miserable worm, but this case is special. As much as I dislike the fact, he is the one that sealed and therefore defeated me, and look at him. He looks pathetic, which in turn makes me look bad for being sealed by someone like that. Hashirama blinked. That somehow makes sense. Ah, our host is here. Minato spun around to see where his predecessor was looking. And indeed, Naruto appeared out of one of the tunnels, looking sheepish as he scratched his head. He cleared his throat. Well, it's nice to see you. He was obviously very nervous, and he kept glancing at Minato, which raised the man's hopes of some kind of bond forming with his son. Naruto walked towards Minato, eyes still glued to the ground. I just wanted to say sorry about what I said earlier. I mean, you didn't have much of a choice, and it's not your fault the village is full of meanies. So, can we forget that ever happened? Minato chuckled. Then he laughed. I make your life bad, unintentionally, and you want my forgiveness. It should be the other way around. But let's just call it even, okay? Naruto grinned. Only if you teach me some really cool jutsu. He shouted. Minato grinned. No problem, but to be able to use the cool stuff really well, we have to go through some of the not so cool stuff first. It sucks, but I can't change it. Naruto pouted, but in the end he agreed. Madara shook his head. While he liked the kid's spunk, it would take much training to turn him into a truly great shinobi. He looked at Hashirama. Are all children like this? He asked. Unlike Madara, Hashirama had married and fathered a child, so he was the more experienced one in this topic. Hashirama shrugged. Pretty much. It depends on how they're raised, but in their nature, they are curious and easily fascinated. But training him might bring us some advantages as well. Madara looked at Naruto and sighed. Not like we have anything better to do. He stated. Nobody could say that Madara-cha didn't like a challenge. For the first time, Naruto really looked around. The sight was not that impressive, a dark sewer with water going halfway up to his knees. And the giant barred gate. He looked at the Kyuubi, really looking at him for the first time. Minato raised a brow at his son's behavior, while Madara and Hashirama returned to their sake. Kyuubi silently watched everything. Then Naruto grinned. I like him. He proclaimed. The reaction was memorable. Minato nearly fell while the other two spit out their drink. What? They shouted while Minato went for a why. Naruto pointed at him. He's orange. He stated, as if that was all there needed to be said. He destroyed half of Konoha. Minato shouted. Naruto nodded. Yeah, but he's orange. And fluffy. And orange. Children. Hashirama muttered, speaking the word as if it were the worst swear word he knew. Madara glanced at Kyuubi, who he could swear was smirking. And indeed, Kyuubi was of a neon orange color. It had always been orange, but not this kill-me bright coloring of a life jacket. Then something clicked in his mind. If the boy's favorite color had been blue, you would have shown up ocean-colored, am I right? Kyuubi's smirk turned into a shit-eating grin. Maybe. He admitted. The three guardians decided that right now, there was no point in trying to convince Naruto that Kyuubi was pure evil. Minato remembered that when he was a child, he had also liked and wanted things simply because they were his favorite color. Then to the adult's amazement, Kyuubi threw all dignity overboard. He whimpered and made large puppy eyes. Naruto, can you do me a really big favor? Please. Pretty please with sugar on top. He spoke in a voice that made him seem like a harmless puppy in desperate need of assistance. Madara had spent the most time with the fox, even though it had not quite been itself, and this was the last thing he expected it to say. It had more pride than the Uchiha and Hyuga clans put together, and here it was, begging in a childish voice. It was against Naruto's nature to ignore someone in need, especially if it looked so cute. He nodded. Sure. How can I help? Kyuubi suppressed a smile. This was going better than he'd hoped. The boy was going to grant the one wish that had become more and more pressing every day he was stuck here. It wasn't like he was asking to be released right now, but was that one wish really that much to ask for? He looked at Naruto. Can I have your permission to make the inside of this cell look how I want to? Naruto blinked. That was it. He nodded. Sure. He said. As soon as he had finished speaking, vibrations seemed to go through the water. Then it was drained away, revealing that the floor made a drastic dive behind the gates. Apparently Kyuubi had been standing in a pool of water deep enough that he was submerged to the shoulders. It did explain how they saw eye to eye most of the time, despite Kyuubi's size. He had apparently been using water walking when they first met to tower over them. Kyuubi shook like a dog, sending enormous amounts of water in all directions before steam started to rise off his body. Kyuubi sighed in relief. Ah. Finally, no water. I'm dry, I'm warm, I'm happy. I owe you one, child. Naruto grinned. Don't mention it, it was nothing. Well, he was happy he could help, the others stared. This was Kyuubi's great wish. Then again, Kyuubi had apparently not been dry for 7 years, so it was understandable. Kyuubi stretched and yawned. There's much I can improve in this setting, but that can wait till tomorrow. Right now, I'm tired. Oh, I almost forgot. He said, and suddenly 2 pictures appeared on the wall. They showed Madara and Hashirama in a rather embarrassing position, as it captured the moment they had spit out the sake. Not exactly a dignified stance. Kyuubi grinned. Home, sweet home. Yeah right. He muttered, before laying down to sleep. Minato scratched his head. Well, that was awkward. Anyways, we'll train you as good as we can, or I will at least, but it won't be easy. You will have to work hard to earn your power. Oh, and I think it's best if nobody but those you trust with your life should know that Kyuubi is not the only thing sealed inside you. Hashirama decided to add his 2 cents. Remember that our identities are to be given out on a need-to-know basis. Madara spoke up. Also, remember that nobody needs to know. Things would spiral out of control if people knew just how much power you have. Since we're at the topic of power, I believe that you'll gain both mine and Hashirama's Kekkei Genkai. Mikuto blinked. Cake what? Minato sighed. Kekkei Genkai. That means bloodline. They're telling you will gain the Sharingan and the ability to control wood, which both are impossible to do without their limit. It usually can't be taught, either you're born into the family that has it, or you can't use it. Kyuubi opened an eye. What are you babbling about? Anyone can control wood, or rather plants. He muttered. All eyes moved to him. What do you mean? Hashirama asked, confused. Nobody but him could use wood or ever had. Kyuubi opened the other eye. Well, everyone might have been an exaggeration, but everyone with a sufficient affinity for earth and water can do it. The reason why such techniques can't simply be copied is that how much of each chakra you need is unique to each person. Therefore, someone trying to make plant, ice, lava, acid, or any other element mix by copying what someone else used will fail, because the percentage of each element that works for one person is unsuited for others due to the differences in the individual chakra concentration. Hashirama looked at Kyuubi. So basically what you're saying is that my child didn't get the bloodline because there is no bloodline. It did explain a few things Hashirama had never understood, for example, why he couldn't get anyone else to successfully control wood or plants as Kyuubi called it. What worked for him simply wouldn't work for others. Well, it'd probably work for Naruto, as he would essentially be using his ability. Kyuubi shook his head. You do have a Kekkei Genkai, but not like you think. What makes mix element bloodlines different from normal element mixes are two things. 1. They are much easier to learn, as an instinctive knowledge on how to create the mix is already rooted in your subconsciousness. But the main difference is that bloodlines grant their mix special properties. I'm not talking about making it harder or more resistant than usual, that can, to a certain degree, be accomplished by chakra. Let's take yours for an example. The special property your bloodline grants your plants the ability to seal Yaki and normal chakra, but it mainly targets Yaki, up to the point where you can actually manipulate the flow of Yaki. Hashirama looked up. So that's why I could tame the Biju. He muttered. Kyuubi nodded. We demons are composed of solidified Yaki, which is why we're immune to time and disease, as there is no real flesh that could rot and die. Since you can manipulate the flow of our Yaki, you can control our movement and our attacks. Madara nodded. Perhaps the boy can use that skill. As for the Sharingan, he'll have mine, but I won't let him activate the Mangekyo's jutsu, much less the eternal Mangekyo's until I deem him ready for it. And that might take a while. He glanced at Naruto. A long while. Naruto pouted, but he had enough common sense to realize that all three guardians, whether directly or indirectly, had agreed to train him, and he had no intention on throwing a tantrum that might change their minds. He looked at Kyuubi. Kyuubi looked back. What? I hardly know any jutsu, I never had a real need for them. But it seems a lot of old knowledge has been lost, so I'll help out with what I can, as long as you don't bother me. He seemed to think. Since some spoilsports will probably object if I say I give you full support if you let me take control once in a while, let alone free me, that offer won't stand. I also want to know just how much knowledge was lost in the flow of time. Naruto grinned. He'd be unbeatable. Then everybody would accept him. Kyuubi on the other hand closed its eyes and embraced a first sleep in 7 years. He had no idea how Shukaku managed without sleep, it was so enjoyable. Oh well, his loss. Itachi bit his lip. So far, things had gone well for him. He had managed to fool his father into believing that Shisui had been doing fine when Itachi had left him behind. He'd forged a suicide note from Shisui and managed to sneak it into his room. But now the tension within the Uchiha clan was slowly rising. Itachi knew what would happen if things went on like this with the thrice-damned Uchiha arrogance, things would get ugly. Right now the only thing that stood between the Uchiha and annihilation was the Sandaime, who, much like him, despised violence. But the man's peaceful attempts to resolve this were slowly but steadily going down the drain. The Uchiha clan's plans of a coup were in their infancy, but they were growing fast, and if it went on, then Konoha would have to act in a few months. But right now he was, per his father's wishes, training his little brother. Nothing big, just a bit of taijutsu. But it also gave him the opportunity to plant a few seeds of doubt within Sasuke's mind, which in time would hopefully keep him from becoming one of the arrogant Uchiha that viewed everybody as beneath him. He blocked one of Sasuke's strikes and made a short jab into the lower ribs, the attempted hook had left open, and Sasuke crumbled. Can't you hold back at least a little? He asked, gasping for air. Itachi shook his head. I am holding back Sasuke, you can tell because your ribs aren't broken. But since you seem to need a break, let's take one. He sat down next to his younger brother, who slowly managed to sit up. Sasuke looked at him. You're really strong, brother. I can't wait till my Sharingan awakens. At this, Itachi's face sunk. Did I use my Sharingan in our spar? Sasuke blinked. Well, no. But. Itachi looked him in the eyes. Then do you think that I'm strong simply because I can activate it? Sasuke was confused. His father had told him they were undefeatable because of their Sharingan. The only thing that could defeat an Uchiha was another Uchiha. But now that he thought about it, Itachi had a point. No, I don't think so. A small smile graced Itachi's features, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. So, why do you think I am so strong? And why are you stronger than the other Uchiha your age? All alarms went off in Sasuke's head. The answer his father would expect would be because we are Uchiha heirs. But something told Sasuke that was not what Itachi wanted to hear. He thought about it, beads of sweat running down his neck. Then, hesitantly, he said because we work harder than the others. He closed his eyes, expecting a slap for saying such blasphemous things about the Uchiha, but all he felt was a pat on the head. When he opened his eyes, he saw Itachi smiling. That's right, brother. We train harder, therefore we are stronger. The Sharingan is very useful, but in the end, it's nothing more than a tool that we can use. And the Sharingan doesn't make us invincible. We still take damage from attacks, and we are not immune to poisons or diseases. Also, what good is being able to see your enemy if your body isn't fast enough to keep up with him? And the Sharingan has a weakness that few know about. In order to copy something, we must understand what's happening. We can copy normal ninjutsu because we know what the hand signs do, how they shape the chakra. That means that if someone uses some sort of hand sign we don't know or simply doesn't use hand signs, we can't copy them. Itachi explained. Sasuke listened to his brother, absorbing the information like a sponge. What hand signs don't we know? And what jutsu don't use hand signs? Itachi's smile widened, this was going better than he had hoped. Sasuke was apparently not completely corrupted by the Uchiha doctrines, so there was still hope for him. He was willing to improve with hard work and he wanted knowledge to cover weaknesses most Uchiha denied they had. Now Itachi would give that knowledge. There are some hand signs that pop up every now and then that we can't copy, like the Yamanaka techniques. Then there are some things that demand chakra control beyond what a normal hand sign is supposed to do, like the Nara's shadow techniques. As for techniques without hand signs, if you train them enough, you'll eventually be able to use almost any jutsu without hand signs, but there are some that don't need any to begin with, like the Yondame's Rasengan or the art of puppetry. That one is particularly nasty, since you can't tell what their puppets are going to do unless you know puppetry and can analyze the movements of their hands. Itachi explained, Sasuke trying to memorize every word. So, how do you beat a puppeteer? Sasuke asked. Itachi's mood was rising faster than he'd ever thought possible. The easiest way is to attack the puppeteer himself. Most puppet users are physically below the average ninja of their rank as their puppets do their fighting. But the puppeteers know that too, which is why they are very good in hiding themselves. Also, when you find one, simply rushing in may not be the best choice. Always expect traps or second puppets. There are also some traps that can be hidden underneath clothing, like senbon launchers. My tactic is to place a chakra strengthened or explosive kunai into the back of their heads from a safe distance. He spoke before looking at the sun. Well, I think you had enough rest, so let's continue our spar. Sasuke groaned as he stood up. He was willing to swear he saw a sadistic smile light Itachi's face as they got into their fighting stances. He knew this wouldn't be pleasant. For the rest of the afternoon, Itachi mopped the floor with him. After Naruto woke up, he threw a tantrum until the stressed-out doctors signed his release papers just to get some peace. Then he wondered where and how his training would be. Suddenly he heard Madara's voice in his head. It will be unpleasant and you'll probably wish you were dead on occasion. And one thing I forgot to mention about the Sharingan you'll get, don't use it when others could see it. That will lead to a few questions you really don't want to answer. Madara said. Then Hashirama spoke. As for where you will train, I believe it's best we choose a spot a good distance away from the village so that we don't raise suspicion due to chakra bursts that might alert Anbu. Naruto saw the logic in that statement and immediately went through the places he knew to see which one was best. He decided on a clearing roughly 20 miles from the village. He knew of it because he wandered through the forests often in search for food or simply a safe place. This clearing was far away from any roads or outposts, and there was a spring flowing through it, supplying water for any water jutsu and the fruit trees. One could spend a large amount of time there during summer without having to worry about running out of essentials. Naruto decided that he'd head there tomorrow. For now he thought about who he could trust with the information that he knew about the Kyuubi and who he wanted to know that it wasn't alone in there. Madara had been quite clear that nobody should know exactly who was inside of him. Okajiji would be on that list, of course. Hashirama and Minato seemed to agree. So little Sarutobi has become a Hokage. The times change so fast. I believe he's trustworthy. Hashirama chuckled. Minato also laughed. I never thought he'd take the job again, he seemed happy with his retirement. I agree with the Shadame, we can trust him. Naruto felt better hearing that the others seemed to like Hokage as well. But who else? Itachi Nyasen, Anko Nisan, Kakashi Nyachen, Yugao Nisan and Tenzo Nyasen were people Naruto really liked, so he thought they would keep it a secret. The Guardians went through his memories to find out who he was talking about and when they found out, they agreed. Madara seemed intrigued by Itachi. Well, who would have thought? There is a decent Uchiha left after all. And if his brother is anything like him, that makes two people. Maybe the Uchiha won't have to go completely extinct after all. But I think you can trust these people. Naruto grinned. But before he went to the Hokage, he decided to make a stop at Ichiraku's, having already retrieved Gama-chan. When he stopped in front of the restaurant, he could hear his father sniff. "Naruto, I'm so proud of you. All on you own, you have found the little piece of heaven Kami left on earth," he said, mentally adding, "It seems he's well liked here. I knew I could count on old man Ichiraku to treat him fairly. He never judged anyone based on anything but his own opinion of them." Naruto grinned, happy that his father seemed to love ramen just as much as he did. Like father, like son as they say. He entered paradise and stayed for an hour, much to the joy of Ichiraku and his daughter, and to the dismay of Gama-chan's body mass before heading to the tower. Chapter 5. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. Speaking shouting. Thinking. Summon Biju. Hashirama. Madara. Minato. Jutsu. Now that his stomach was satisfied, Naruto headed to the Hokage tower. As soon as he entered, he met the first hurdle in form of the secretary. "The Hokage is busy, come again later," she stated coldly. "When will he have time?" Naruto asked. He was pretty sure she was one of those that hated him, but maybe Gigi really was busy. She glared at him. "That's none of your business, now go before I call the Anbu on you." Naruto frowned, but before he could say anything, the Hokage's head poked through the door. "I thought I heard Naruto, good to see you, come in." Naruto blinked. "I thought you were busy." Sarutobi blinked. "How did you get that idea? For once I'm having a breather in my duties." Then his gaze fell on the secretary, who suddenly seemed very busy, and all became clear. Well, she was not taking her work seriously, so Sarutobi had been looking for a reason to part ways with her anyway. He waved Naruto in and signaled him to take a seat. "Now, what can I do for you?" he asked. Naruto fidgeted a bit, which caught the Hokage's attention. Naruto never fidgeted, he always spoke what he thought, consequences be damned. This seemed big. Then he cleared his throat. Gigi, I'm not sure how to start this, but you know I've been attacked, right?" Sarutobi nodded, slowly getting worried. "Yes Naruto, I know, and I don't condone any of it." Naruto smiled. "I know Gigi, but that's not what I wanted to say. You see here," Madara interrupted him mentally. "Hold that thought. Before you continue speaking, ask the Hokage to send the Anbu out and soundproof the room," he ordered. Naruto didn't notice any Anbu, but they weren't the best for nothing. "Gigi, can you soundproof this room and maybe send the Anbu out for a minute?" he asked. Sarutobi blinked. "How do you know there are Anbu here?" he asked. Naruto's sweat dropped, but then he had an epiphany. "You're the Hokage, you are always guarded, right?" Sarutobi smiled. "That's right Naruto, I'm impressed you figured it out." He gestured and 3 Anbu appeared, bowed and left the room. Once the door closed, Sarutobi laid a finger on a seal on his desk and the room glowed for a moment. "Nobody can hear what we say now Naruto, so you can tell me what you want." Naruto nodded. "Okay. Well, when I was beaten, I lost consciousness and I ended up in my mind." Sarutobi tensed, but Naruto continued. "I found a giant cage and in the cage there was the Kyuubi." Sarutobi became dead serious. "Naruto, please understand. The Yondaime had no choice but to." Naruto raised a hand. "I know, and I've already forgiven my father." Sarutobi dropped his pipe. "You know the Yondaime is your father?" he asked, completely shocked. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, but that's not all I wanted to tell you. Kyuubi isn't the only thing sealed inside of me." Sarutobi dropped into his seat, this was all too much. "That can't be true Naruto, Minato sealed nothing but the Kyuubi within you. It has to be a trick so that you trust one of the aliases and release it." "Don't I wish?" Kyuubi muttered. Naruto shook his head. "No Gigi, the Shinigami sealed 3 humans in me to guard the seal. And they agreed to train me, isn't that great? And Kyuubi said he wanted to know how much old knowledge was lost or something like that, so he'll help once in a while, though it sounds more like giving advice," he said happily. Sarutobi blinked. He felt the urge to take a strong drink to calm his nerves. He took a deep breath. "Who is guarding the seal?" Naruto looked apologetic. "They were clear that I shouldn't mention their names, but I can guarantee that they're really strong and that they won't make me burn down Konoha or anything like that." "I wouldn't bet on that one," Madara dryly stated. Naruto ignored him. "So I might vanish for a while to train, but no reason to worry." He gave Sarutobi a heartwarming smile and the old man couldn't help but calm down. "I see. But still, I don't think it's a good idea to leave you without supervision," he reasoned. Naruto nodded. "You can tell Itachi Niasen, Tenzo Niasen, Kakashi Niasen, Yugao Niasen and Anko Niasen about me knowing about Kyuubi and the 3 guardians, but they said they'd only train me away from curious eyes." Sarutobi nodded. This only proved that the guardians were ninja, as they didn't want outsiders to know of their art. "Can you at least give me a basic area where to search for you?" Naruto frowned. Then he pointed in a direction. "Between 10 and 50 miles that way." Sarutobi nodded and smiled. Thank you for the trust, I'm guessing that's all for now. Naruto nodded. Bye Gigi. He called and left. Sarutobi leaned back in his chair. This had been a startling revelation that he still hadn't completely digested. But he had a sneaking suspicion that he knew who one of the guardians was. It seems the gods were not as cruel as I thought, as they did allow you to watch your son grow up. Though I doubt this was what you wanted to see, Minato. Naruto had decided to start his training as soon as possible, aka the same day. After a 5-hour hike through the forest, he reached a large clearing he had chosen as his private training field. Hashirama chuckled. Well, this is nostalgic, I myself left this clearing as a spot where I trained with my brother. The fruit trees were a very nice touch, if I do say so myself. He stated to Naruto's immense surprise. Then a wide grin took over Naruto's face. So I'll be training at the same place where both the first and the second Hokage trained. Cool. So, how do we begin? Madara sighed. First of all, you have to improve your physical condition. You're already pretty fast, but you need more strength and stamina. Also, I intend to teach you a martial art style, but you're way too stiff, seeing as the Urugu Genzu, Wavering Phantom, relies on flexibility and can be made even more effective with hidden weaponry. Building up on that style is a sword style called Tsuku Kamitachi, Hunting Kamitachi, my own preferred sword style. He explained. What's so great about those? Naruto mentally asked. Madara explained. Both have a distinctive quality. They're impossible to predict. They rely on moving in a way that your opponent doesn't know what to expect. One of the strongest styles of combat is the Drunken Fist, even though its masters usually don't get too old. What makes that style so dangerous is its unpredictability, following no pattern whatsoever, therefore it cannot be analyzed. The martial art I'll teach you is derived from that very same style, only that one moves with a bit more dignity. Once you learn how to use a sword, that won't change, seeing that many of the Tsuku Kamitachi's stances don't appear like you're ready for combat. You might be leaning on your sword or having it resting on your shoulder moments before you strike. But as I said, you're not flexible enough for that yet. Naruto's eyes were burning with determination, mentally already picturing his new kick-ass self when Hashirama decided to speak as well. Having fought Madara many times, I know one weakness his styles hold, the sword style in particular. Since you are using unpredictable attacks that often come from unusual angles or are staged out of uncommon and sometimes impractical positions, resulting in a decrease in stopping power, you can't put much power behind your strikes. While you will fight extremely well with Madara's styles, they're not designed to end battles quickly, it's more like fighting a war of attrition. I will teach you a style that may counter that weakness and perhaps you'll even manage to combine our styles. My style has the fitting name Juggernaut. It works by circulating your body's energy, called Kai, through your body, giving you superhuman strength with minimal strain to your body. Also, since your Kai won't leave your body, there is no substantial decrease in your overall energy and none to your chakra. I will teach you that once you're at least adept in handling a sword for sheer hand-to-hand combat, Madara's style is effective enough. Naruto was jumping with joy. This was incredible and it was just his taijutsu training. Both Hashirama and Madara had, as far as Naruto knew, mainly relied on ninjutsu, so how great would that be? And his father was one of if not the best seal master ever. While seals seemed boring at first, Naruto knew that he could do great things with them if he mastered them. How do we start? He asked. With the basics. They just said you weren't fit enough, so we'll start with that. Run 50 laps around this clearing, then you stretch for 10 minutes to help your flexibility. Afterwards, you'll do 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups. Then we'll start with basic chakra manipulation, followed by a bit of mental exercises. We'll steadily up both your physical and mental exercises until you reach a point where your taijutsu lessons can begin. Same with your chakra control, once that reaches an acceptable, we start your ninjutsu lessons. Minato answered. Naruto pouted, but after a second, it took almost 2 weeks, but Naruto finally reached the necessary stamina, strength and flexibility to learn Madara's style. Naruto nearly popped limbs many times while trying to get the moves down, his efforts graced by moderate success. His chakra training was going a bit better. He had managed to make a leaf float and to his own amazement, he was able to walk up trees as well. He had learned the 3 basic academy jutsu from his father, but for some reason, the Bunshin always eluded his grasp. Kyuubi explained that because of the 5 different wavelengths of his chakra, his control was below average. In return, his reserves were humongous, and interestingly it was denser and more potent. This meant that he needed less chakra to perform a technique and that his chakra paths would continue to widen because of the pressure, increasing his reserve. Once the reserve had adjusted to the larger paths, it would widen them again, turning the growth of his chakra into an endless cycle. These factors resulted in the situation that even the smallest amount of chakra Naruto was able to produce already overloaded the Bunshin jutsu. To solve this problem, Minato discussed a few ideas with the other guardians, and in the end they decided that the cage bunshin was the perfect solution. Not only would it be more effective than the illusionary clones, the added effect of the clones giving their knowledge and experience would be a great help in Naruto's training. Of course it didn't help with his physical training, so they decided that Naruto's clones would train chakra control, seals and whatever else they could, while Naruto himself trained his body to improve his taijutsu. They would also teach him a clone technique that could take more than one hit so that he could get used to fighting, and specifically fighting multiple enemies, while being aware of one's surroundings. Naruto was more than happy to learn these jutsu and shove the reading to his clones, it was boring. The only lesson he feared was the resistance training with Madara. All his beatings had already given him a high tolerance for pain, so Madara focused on stealing Naruto's mind. Unknown to most, Madara and his brother had been very curious and studied certain things until they reached a mastery unheard of. One of the things Madara had mastered was killing intent, which he used on Naruto to harden him. He only used a fraction of what he was able to do, but it never failed to bring Naruto to his knees. Madara mentioned that he would also teach Naruto to use Kai, not just the basic pressure, but also the version that gave images of a brutal death and Madara's personal favorite, using Kai in a way that made him imperceptible to enemies without them even noticing anything was wrong. On the days he didn't have to train he spent time with Jiji and his other Nai and Nisans. Anko introduced him to her boss, a bear of a man named Ibiki, but he seemed okay to Naruto, and they quickly got along. Spending time with Tenzo was always a little awkward, but Naruto was used to the man's quirks. But Itachi was worrying him. While Itachi seemed in a good mood when he told Naruto about his younger brother and how he was wiping the floor, training him, and that his parents had made Itachi his guardian, there seemed to be something that was on his mind, depressing him. But whenever Naruto tried to ask Itachi, he would just give him a smile and change the topic. That behavior was not soothing Naruto's worries in the least, and Madara started to notice something fishy as well. Many weeks would pass before they received an answer to their questions. Naruto was enjoying the end of one of his free days, wandering around looking at the sky turning crimson with the setting sun. Since he hadn't been paying attention to where he was going, it was no surprise he found himself somewhere he had no memory of entering. It was a training ground, a pretty basic one too. There were the wooden logs that some ninja used to improve the strength of their hits, but not much else. Except Itachi. The Uchiha was sitting on a recently fallen tree, Naruto guessed he had felled it himself, face buried in his hands. Naruto cleared his throat. "Are you alright, Itachi?" Itachi looked up, but relaxed when he saw the blonde mop of hair and the telltale whisker marks. He smiled weakly. "Naruto, good to see you. Take a seat." Naruto did as asked and for a while they sat in silence until Itachi seemed to strengthen his resolve. "Naruto, do me a favor." Said boy looked at him. "What kind of favor?" he asked. Itachi looked at him. "Nothing complicated, just a simple favor. Tomorrow evening, stay away from the Uchiha compound." "Why?" Naruto asked. Itachi looked sad. "I fear something bad might happen, something that I can't stop, and I don't want you caught in the crossfire." Naruto looked shocked. "Shouldn't you tell the Hokage then?" he asked. A sad smile flashed on Itachi's face. He already knows, but there's not much anyone can do. Naruto didn't really understand, but Madara did. Something was going to happen, and it would likely be bloody. Naruto's thoughts were more focused on helping Itachi. "And I really can't do anything to help." Itachi was about to shake his head when an idea hit him. "Naruto, there might be something you can do for me." Naruto straightened up. "How can I help?" he asked in a serious voice that coming from a 7-year-old would be hilarious if the situation weren't so grim. Itachi smiled. "You remember my younger brother Sasuke?" he asked. Naruto frowned in concentration, then he nodded. "I saw him once or twice, and you always talk about him. He seems okay, what about him?" Itachi looked him in the eyes. "Should I for whatever reason no longer be able to take care of him, could you keep an eye on Sasuke? You know, be his friend, train with him, make sure he doesn't go insane or starts to take all the junk the bloodline lovers spout seriously." Naruto nodded eagerly. If he couldn't help Itachi any other way, he'd at least try to look over his family. Itachi gave his first real smile of the evening. "I knew I could count on you." With that, he ruffled through Naruto's hair, knowing the boy didn't like that very much, though he would allow it as a gesture of care. Then he was gone. Naruto looked at the spot Itachi had formerly occupied. That had been weird. Really weird. The next day he headed to his usual training site. He had to admit he was proud of himself, considering he now only needed little more than an hour to reach it. He created his usual 100 kg bunshin and prepared for his usual routine when, to his immense surprise, Madara interrupted him. "Naruto, take it easy and save your strength today. And we're going back to the village early today," he said. Naruto was confused. "Why?" he mentally asked. The words of that Itachi made me curious. I want to know what will happen at that clan tonight. Who knows, perhaps my wish will be granted. Madara explained. What wish? Naruto asked. I'll tell you another time. Madara said. Naruto shrugged. If Madara didn't want to talk about something, he didn't, simple as that. What is going on in your head? Hashirama asked Madara, who simply smirked in return. Wouldn't you like to know? Yes we would. Minato interrupted. What I want to know why you're making this risky plan. If you read between the lines of Itachi's words, it's possible hell will break loose there. I don't want Naruto to die there. He clarified. I'm down, I have no interest in a meeting with the Shinigami either, so I'll make sure Naruto won't die. I'll take over should the need arise, and any lighter wound the fox can heal, whatever it's doing right now. Madara calmed them down. Ever since Naruto had given Kyuubi permission to make his cell look however it wanted, a dark curtain had blocked the sight into the cage, Kyuubi only occasionally sticking its head out to give a comment. The Guardians didn't care too much, the Kyuubi's one protest of their training ideas was enough for them not to ask for a repeat performance. Flashback. The Guardians were discussing certain issues about Naruto's training, slowly coming to an agreement when Madara mentioned a point they hadn't discussed yet. I believe it's for the best we tell Naruto to stop playing pranks, it's immature and won't help him gather skills. He had hardly finished when all three were thrown off their feet, both by the shaking ground and a hurricane-like gust of wind. It took them a second to understand what had happened. Kyuubi had thrown itself against the gate and was now clawing at them. Not that it had any point, as the gate was too narrow to get the claws even close to the Guardians. What's the big idea? Minato cursed, rubbing a bump on his head. Kyuubi's answer was the last thing they had expected. Not the pranks. Take a paw, take a leg, take a tail, not the pranks. It whined. Hashirama blinked. Why are the pranks so important to you? He asked. Kyuubi huffed. They're the only entertainment I have in here. Also, I'm a kitsune, and we love a good prank. Don't take the pranks away. Think of it as stealth training, getting in and out without being noticed, just don't take the pranks away. It suggested in desperation. The Guardians looked at each other, they hadn't really thought of it like that, but now that Kyuubi mentioned it, it sounded like a good idea. They nodded and the Kyuubi retreated back into its new and improved cage to do who knows what. End of flashback. The Kyuubi had been adamant and Naruto had continued playing pranks on people. The Kyuubi thanked him by correcting the Guardians when they explained hand signs, giving them knowledge lost for eternities. Naruto, come into your mind, we want to teach you the hand signs, and they're easier to learn if you can see our hands. Minato said. Naruto obeyed and stood before his father. They smiled at each other and exchanged a short hug before Hashirama cleared his throat. Naruto gave Hashirama his undivided attention. Naruto, these are the basic seals. He showed them to Naruto, who tried to memorize them. Hashirama nodded. Good. Now that you know all 12 hand signs, you have to learn to make them instantly. Kyuubi's head broke through the curtain. All 12. What on earth are you talking about? Madara blinked. You did say you knew all hand signs. Shouldn't you know then? Dog, tiger, dragon, boar. Kyuubi's face lightened. Oh, you're talking about the Eastern Zodiac set. You're right, of course, that set consists of 12 signs, just like the Western Zodiac set. The former is best for basic elemental manipulation, while the latter works better for non-elemental techniques, although both sets can be used for both purposes. They should be learned before one starts advanced hand signs, which are complex enough to be a sign language by itself. Everyone stared at Kyuubi. What? It asked. Minato gulped. Ninja today only used 12 hand signs. If what you say is true, then everything else was lost in history. Kyuubi's face held limitless shock. You're kidding me. Three heads shook. Kyuubi shook its head. You can be serious. How can you only know 12 signs when Kyuubi pointed at Hashirama uses an advanced sign in nearly all his jutsu? Hashirama blinked. Who, me? Yes you. The final sign in your Mokuton jutsus. Kyuubi hissed. Hashirama put his hands together in a praying fashion, the sign used to end all Mokuton jutsu. This is no hand sign, it's just something I do because I noticed it helps me focus and makes controlling trees and plant life easier. Kyuubi face-palmed, an action that created wind strong enough to blow the bangs out of Minato's face. It's unbelievable, he uses an advanced hand sign half his life, and he doesn't even know it. I wonder if it came with the Kekkei Genkai instincts. Of course it's easier to control plants like that, it's the forest sign for crying out loud. Okay, you guys teach him the Eastern Zodiac, I'll handle the rest. Unfucking believable. The last part came out as a mutter, while Kyuubi retreated back into his now hidden cage. Madara shrugged off the memories and turned to Hashirama and Minato, intending to have a private discussion without yet about Naruto. He has made shocking progress, even before he began to use the Kage Bunshin to master jutsu and chakra exercises. He has a wide arsenal of E to C rank jutsu, and I'm considering starting with elemental training. What are your opinions on the matter? He asked. Hashirama scratched his chin. He certainly is talented, and he works very hard to learn, which I believe is a major part of his achievements. He seems proficient in his taijutsu, even if he is still far away from mastering it. I would agree that learning elemental manipulation sooner may give him an edge. He stated. Minato smiled. I was thinking of bringing the topic up myself a little later, but I agree with you. He's ready to learn it, but we should keep an eye on him, he's still a bit immature. Madara nodded. I also considered starting his sword training. While training will be easy, finding a blade that can last in real combat is not. There are only 2 blades of sufficient quality in Konoha, and they're both hidden under the Uchiha clan, not that they know it. But any blade will last for a few missions before breaking. I'm bringing up something else that I deem important, the boy's first kill. It doesn't have to be now or even soon, but it should happen before he becomes a genin. Hashirama nodded, sharing Madara's opinion. Naruto hesitating to finish off an opponent could be a fatal mistake. He didn't have to become a murder lover, but the experience could save his life. Minato understood that as well, but it didn't mean he had to like it. He begrudgingly nodded. Madara acknowledged the support when he noticed that the sun had started to set. He contacted Naruto. Naruto, we should head back. And make a stop at the Uchiha compound, if possible. I'd like to pick up something I left there. If you don't mind, I'll take over should it be necessary. Naruto shrugged. But before he left, he turned to a hollow tree and grabbed into an opening. Minato was shocked at what he pulled out. It was an Anbu mask, and it wasn't just any mask either. It was the Kitsune mask. Where did you get that? He stammered. Naruto blinked in confusion. What was wrong? I found it in the trash behind that big building with outdoors. What's wrong? Minato knew he was talking about Anbu headquarters, the only building built with outdoors for security reasons to keep non-ninja out. After the Kyuubi's attack, it made sense that nobody wanted that particular mask, but still. He was pissed. Naruto, Anbu masks are embedded with a number of seals to give the wearer a certain edge, but that one is special. It's one of the few I made and equipped with seals personally, so it's far superior to normal Anbu masks. He explained. Naruto looked at the mask with new respect. He had found it at the end of the worst months in his life when he dug through an unguarded trash can desperate for food. He hadn't found any, but the mask had given him back hope and the wish to be Hokage, things he had nearly lost in his desperate situation. Shortly after he had found Ichiraku's, a small ramen shop that didn't send him away, but instead nurtured him back to health. That first bowl of ramen had been the most delicious thing he had ever eaten. A few days later he had managed to sneak into Jiji's office, and the Hokage had been shocked about his situation. He got his own apartment the very same day. The question popped up in Naruto's head. You said you made a few ones, which ones? Minato thought for a second. Let's see, there was the Tora mask, a classic. Then the Inu and Nico masks, there was a Hibi mask, but nobody used it after Orochimaru defected. The Kitsune mask of course, but I have a feeling I'm forgetting one. Ah, now I remember, the Itachi Weasel mask. That was all of them. He counted them on his fingers, making sure he had them all. Naruto grinned, almost all of those belonged to people he liked, and Anko would probably take the last one someday. So what's so special about them? Naruto asked. Minato smiled. Simple. Amongst its other benefits, the moment you put it on, only you can remove it. Also, as soon as it's on your face, it changes your entire outfit to what you want it to look like, though that function must be consciously activated. Naruto put on the mask and a second later, he was wearing something that looked like the Hokage's outfit, only in bright orange. Cool. Naruto shouted. Madara face-palmed. Maybe, but it ruins the impression that you're an Anbu. For that, you'd need something different. He sent Naruto a mental image of what he had in mind, and moments later, Naruto complied and his outfit changed again. Now he was wearing a long black jacket with a hood and sleeves so long that his hands, which were now fitted in black gloves, barely poked out of them. Looking down he saw long black pants whose endings were wrapped to his legs with grey bandages that vanished in his black boots. Since the hood was raised, there was not a single inch of skin nor a single hair visible. Madara nodded, satisfied with the result. With this, they could go to the Uchiha without being too obvious. He was interested in what would happen tonight. Itachi swallowed as the last man fell. He had done it. The Uchiha clan was finished. Almost. The driving force behind the coup was still alive. His parents. Fugaku was the leader, but unfortunately for her and Itachi, his mother was supporting her husband with all her heart. A man doesn't do something like this without the support or at least agreement of his wife. It hurt Itachi to do it, but Sasuke would be an orphan once this was over. He bit his lip as he turned to his home and prayed to whatever gods were listening that Sasuke wouldn't come home anytime soon. Sadly, his prayers weren't answered. Naruto reached the compound and immediately noticed a irregularity. Where were the guards? There were always 2 guards at the entrance of the compound to keep unwanted people, like him, out. But now there was nothing, nobody was in sight. He stepped through the gates, still expecting somebody to stop him, but again nothing happened. He looked around and understood why the guards hadn't stopped him. They were laying behind the walls close to the gate, their throats slit, a look of shock forever etched onto their faces. Now that he looked around, there were more corpses. What they all had in common was that their expressions were not ones of pain, but ranging from surprise to horror. They had died swiftly and almost painlessly. Still, Naruto felt bile rise up and fought to suppress it. To his own amazement, he succeeded. Madara spoke up. Impressive. Add some fire and I'd say that I landed in one of my daydreams. You were dreaming of this? Naruto mentally hissed. It was disgusting, and Madara dreamed about it. You don't understand what the Uchiha clan has become. Before Konoha was founded, our clan trusted in their own virtues. The times were brutal, and death was a constant companion in our journeys. The Senju clan was our greatest foe in our battles, the one clan that was our equal. Hashirama was considered the greatest of the Senju, while I was considered the greatest of the Uchiha. We were bound to cross blades on the battlefield, and we did many times. Don't misunderstand, there was no man I respected as much as him, and I know the feeling is mutual. But one day, everything changed. Madara spoke, lost in memories. What happened? Naruto asked. I came to the Uchiha and asked them to make an alliance with us. Not only with the Senju clan, but with other clans and Hai no Kuni itself. We'd protected against the other countries, and in return we got a place in which we could make our own rules. I was tired of the permanent fighting and dying, and I was not the only one. That was Konoha's birth. Hashirama explained, also mentally far away. Now this was history Naruto could pay attention to. What happened? Madara sighed. The Uchiha were also tired of the fighting and pressured me as clan leader to agree. I was the only one who was against the idea. Why? It sounds great. Naruto stated. It sounds great, but it couldn't last. Of course I'll admit that I had personal reasons not to like the Senju and their allies, one of them killed and desecrated my brother, but there was another reason I didn't want to agree to Hashirama's plan. However, in the end, the rest of the clan forced my hand. Madara said. What was that reason? I always wondered why you disliked the idea so much. Hashirama spoke, interested. Both the Uchiha and the Senju were great clans. Both were superior to all their allies, we were the strongest and we knew that. However, our clans were equal in strength. Such a delicate balance cannot hold very long. To quote a saying, 2 tigers cannot live in one jungle. There is no way 2 dominant clans will tolerate not being the top dog forever. Either a war would erupt or one side would gradually become servants to the other. And the election for the first Hokage was showing which side would be the masters. To the Uchiha, it seemed like they were merely acknowledging Hashirama's achievements, but it was the beginning of the end. I tried to reason with my clan, but I was merely called a warmonger. I left Konoha to gather knowledge and strength, to complete a few things, to prepare for the battle that would come, and to observe the Uchiha to see if perhaps I had been too paranoid. But my fears were accurate, the Uchiha were slowly turning into servants for the Senju and other clans, the fire that once burned in their hearts diminishing. In such cases, it's better to burn the existing system and its keepers down and start from scratch. Madara explained. In a weird way, it made sense. So now what? Naruto asked. Now we look around if there's anyone left. Although I'd like to take control of your body in case the one who caused this is still here. You're not bad, but you don't have the necessary bite yet. Madara stated. Naruto nodded and temporarily relinquished control of his body to Madara. It was a weird feeling, moving without wanting to move, but Naruto shrugged it off as he watched his body kick into action. Itachi had just finished off his father. It was almost sad how little resistance the leader of a coup to overthrow the village offered, even if the drug that Itachi had put into the clan's supply of drinking water slightly dulled his senses and chakra control. After all, the effects were fairly weak to make sure that nobody noticed before it was too late. He looked at his mother, who seemed calm. Why are you doing this, Itachi? She asked. Your plan will drag this village into a civil war, and even if the Uchiha win, the other villages, seeing that Konoha now consists of but a single, still combat-weakened clan, will descent on us and the entire Hai no Kuni like locusts. Your plans would cause so much bloodshed, cost so many lives. I can't let that happen. Makoto looked at him, her eyes showing no fear. I see. What about Sasuke? He will live. He will probably be the last Sharingan wielder in Konoha. Itachi stated. His mother nodded. Do what you must. A single tear ran down Itachi's eye as he ended her life. Unlike his father, she looked peaceful, as if she was merely sleeping. Itachi took a step back. It was done. Now he just had to get away before. Ha-san. To-san. Itachi winced. Why now of all times? He wiped a tear away as he slowly stepped into the moonlight, knowing Sasuke had already noticed him. After the weeks of training, Sasuke could somehow sensed his presence. Sasuke looked at him wide-eyed. Nai-san, they are. Itachi put on a motionless mask. I know Sasuke. Sasuke looked at him. Outside, they're all. Itachi nodded. Dead. I killed them. It took a few seconds before Sasuke understood his brother's words. What? He gasped. I killed them. Itachi repeated. I annihilated the Uchiha clan. Tears ran freely down Sasuke's cheeks. Why? He whispered. Now Itachi was in a bind. The truth was not an option, so he had to improvise. It was to test my potential. He finally answered. That actually sounded plausible. Sasuke knew Itachi had never gone all out in a long time. Itachi silently congratulated himself for the good excuse. For a second he had been worried his excuse might be of a Kakashi Hada quality, in other words, as easy to see through as polished glass. Sasuke bought it. Just for that. You killed them all just for that. Rah. With a cry of rage, he threw himself at Itachi. But the former Anbu captain remained calm, plucked his brother out of the air, and threw him through the thin sliding doors onto the street. What he would do next was the last thing he wanted to do, but it would look suspicious if Sasuke got away with a few scrapes while all others died, by his brother's hand no less. So he steeled his resolve and left the house in a burst of speed. Sasuke groaned as he fought to stand. Attacking Itachi head-on had not been one of his best ideas. He had sparred with him often enough to know he was no match for his brother, but his anger had blinded him. Ironically, to lose control of one's emotions was the first thing Itachi had told him never to do. Itachi. Where was he? He knew that fighting him was suicide, so he did the only smart thing. He retreated. He had not run long when he heard Itachi's voice. You're running away? I expected more. But it's time I ended this. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at the same time. Sasuke looked around frantically, trying to locate his brother before he attacked. Finally he remembered another thing Itachi had told him. People rarely look up. He raised his head and saw Itachi crouching on a pole like a cat. He saw his Sharingan, then he heard Itachi mutter Mangekyo Sharingan. And watched in fascinated horror as his brother's eyes seemed to mutate as the three Tama merged into a single shape. Then everything went black. The last thing he heard was Itachi's voice stating Tsukiyomi. I think that's far enough. Only when this new voice spoke did Sasuke realize the darkness had come because someone had put his hand over his eyes. He shoved it off and saw that the one who had stepped in was about his size, dressed completely in black and was wearing a Anbu mask that showed a fox. Itachi tensed, he had never seen this guy before. His size indicated that he was in Sasuke's age, but the voice didn't match. Was it a genjutsu he couldn't see through? If so, it would have to be a powerful one. Who was he? And a soldier? No, they had a special symbol on their masks. A secret Anbu, some sort of last resort weapon. Maybe. There was a simple way that might answer his questions. Who are you? A low chuckle came through the mask. Who indeed? The unknown figure muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. It was worth a try. Itachi regained his calm and looked at him. This is a clan matter. You should leave, well you still can. The figure chuckled. Clan matter, huh? Tell you what pup, using that on a decent Uchiha is a big no-no. With that, he opened his eyes, a fully evolved Sharingan spinning in them. Itachi's eyes widened. He didn't know of any other Uchiha in Anbu besides him and the missing Shishi. He also noticed that this newcomer had called him pup, which indicated that he saw himself as superior to Itachi and a good bit older. Itachi knew he had some time and decided to start relaxed before he'd send him to hell. Well, this is a surprise. Shouldn't you be wearing an Uchiha insignia somewhere? Shishi actually carved it into his mask. The figure tilted its head. Shishi. Ah, him. May his soul burn in hell. As for the insignia, will this suffice? He raised his left hand and the fan of the Uchiha suddenly appeared on the glove. Itachi's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Minato asked him. Don't worry, now he thinks my appearance is a high-level genjutsu and won't think that this is our real height. Madara explained. And he was right. Itachi had concluded that whoever was before him was using some advanced genjutsu on him, most likely to mock him for being beaten by someone Sasuke's size. He also concluded that Shishi was dead, and from the sound of it, this guy had something to do with it. Whoever he was, this man was obviously dangerous. Itachi sent killing intent his way that left Sasuke, who was still standing beside the figure, gasping for air. The man just shook his head. You have much to learn. The man said. This is how you use killing intent. In an instant, an incredibly strong wave had washed over the clan compound and Sasuke was hugging the floor before he realized it, his entire body refusing to function under these conditions. Itachi was shook. This was intense. But his opponent wasn't done. And this is how you focus it. Suddenly the pressure on Sasuke vanished and he could bring himself up to a crouched position again. Itachi on the other hand suddenly had extreme difficulty breathing. This was insane. This guy's mere presence was so powerful it wasn't funny. Itachi knew from the man's behavior that he knew that he was superior to Itachi and after feeling this Kai, Itachi wasn't sure if he wasn't right. He needed to end this fast. His eyes changed back into the Mangekyo. The figure snorted. Are you sure? You've barely tapped into its potential and have next to no experience, unlike me. With that, his eyes formed the eternal Mangekyo, not that Itachi could recognize it. Itachi was shocked. This man had the Mangekyo as well. Itachi knew that he was a beginner with the Mangekyo and if this guy spoke the truth, he was an expert or at least proficient with its usage. While he may be able to win if he pulled it off right and somehow surprised him, the chances were not high and Itachi thought it'd be better if the Hokage knew of this. He made the same decision Sasuke had made. He would retreat so that he lived to fight another day. He looked at his brother and decided to throw him a bone as he told him the location of the Uchiha's most secret location that was used as a meeting ground, library, and many other things. The figure didn't seem to mind. Itachi gave his last goodbyes. Perhaps the next time we meet you'll have the strength to kill me. For that, you need hatred, so never forget what happened here. As for you, he looked at the figure, we'll meet again. Then he was gone. Madara watched Itachi leave, gave Naruto some final instructions like don't use your real voice and relinquished the control back to him. Naruto knew Sasuke was behind him and decided to put on a small show. He sighed in relief. Thank heaven he bought it. He said. Sasuke slowly got back on his feet. What do you mean? He asked. Naruto turned his head to him, the eternal Mangekyo fading from his eyes, though Madara let him use the normal Sharingan to not give away his eye color. I have just finished training myself before I came here. I'm low on chakra and physically exhausted. He could have killed us with some effort on his part. Fortunately, he bought my bluff. Remember, sometimes all you have to do is seem superior to your enemy to make him retreat. And why the long face? Sasuke bit his lip. The entire clan is dead. As an Uchiha, shouldn't you feel just as bad? Naruto shrugged. He decided to use half-truths. I've long since cut ties with this clan. They had become arrogant and lazy, choosing to completely rely on their Sharingan and the skill of others. The Sharingan is a wonderful tool, but you should never become dependent on it. Training with Itachi, Sasuke couldn't really disagree, but there was a deeper reason for Sasuke's sadness. He killed them all, even our parents, just to test his abilities. Bullshit. Naruto stated. Sasuke looked up. What? I said bullshit. He obviously saw me as a dangerous opponent, yet instead of fighting me, he chose to flee, indicating he was confident that he'd be able to shake me. If he really wanted to test his abilities, why didn't he fight me and retreat if things turned grim? There's something else going on here and I'd really like to know what. Sasuke was shocked. This guy was right, if Itachi wanted to see where his limits were, why did he flee when faced with what could be a real challenge? It indeed seemed fishy. Naruto looked at him. A final piece of advice. There is a very fine line between using your emotions and being used by your emotions. Being angry is fine, but you can't let yourself be devoured by anger. If you do, you'll eventually push everyone away from you, and I can assure you that there is no hell worse than loneliness. And even if you kill the evil, if you are consumed by rage, you will only take its place. Revenge leaves you hollow once it's accomplished, and few can truly live again like that. Wise words. Madara stated, but now we should leave. The Anbu are almost here. We can pick up what I wanted to get another time. Naruto nodded, then he snapped towards the direction the Anbu had to come from. Time for me to go. With that, he was gone. A few seconds later, a group of Anbu appeared. One of them spoke into his headset. We have a survivor, I repeat, we have a survivor. Send a medic ASAP. Sasuke leaned on a wall as more people swarmed into the graveyard that was the Uchiha compound, observing the darkness that slowly crawled from the edges of his vision. He was placed on a stretcher when the darkness overtook him and he fell into blissful unconsciousness. His last thought went to his unknown savior. Who was he? Chapter 6. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto. Speaking, shouting. Thinking. Summon Biju. Hashirama. Madara. Minato. Jutsu. Naruto yawned. The last night had been taxing, to say the least. Even though he hadn't been the one staring Itachi down, his body still remembered the experience. His father and the others had told him that it was okay to skip training today and relax. The question was, how? He had gone to Ichiraku's, the one place he'd always loved more than anything else, and listened to the citizens exchange rumors about what happened at the Uchiha compound. While he knew more than all of them put together, something told Naruto it was best if nobody knew that. But now he was bored. Because of the commotion, everyone ranked Chunin and above were on duty, meaning that he couldn't visit any of his friends. Gigi also was busy with the whole mess, so Naruto really had nothing to do. He wondered why Itachi Nyasen had killed his clan, but that was yet another question he wouldn't get answered in the near future. It was so frustrating to want so many things and get none of them. But sulking never helped, so Naruto returned to the question of how to spend his time. Well, his water walking could still use some work, as he could stand and walk, but still sank in if he tried to run, so why not work on that? But that decision made, he decided to save himself the walk to his usual grounds and just use the nearest available source. Sasuke sighed. He had been released from the hospital earlier today, and he was downright furious with the behavior of the villagers. They either started whispering when they saw him while giving him looks of pity, or babbling something about his strength to be the lone survivor and of the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. Sasuke was sick of it already. And he wasn't the only Uchiha left, just the only one with a chance to awaken the Sharingan. Itachi had spared a few of the people that had been declared unable to both activate the Sharingan and produce offspring that could. But only a few were left, one old man, a 7-year-old and a young woman that led a small Uchiha orphanage together with the children in said orphanage, but in reality the place had been where parents that produced worthless offspring dumped them. The young woman, being just like the children she cared for, had been known for her dislike for the Uchiha leadership and her undying love for the children under her care. On the night of the massacre, she had told the children to hide in the cellar, hid the entrance and blocked the entrance of the orphanage with her body. Itachi had knocked her unconscious, but apparently decided to otherwise ignore her and the children. Yet he was hailed as the sole survivor because he was Konoha's last chance to keep the Sharingan. Sasuke spat out and directed his thoughts to less infuriating topics. The Hokage had told him that tomorrow, Sasuke would be questioned on what happened, so he should rest for today. Sasuke was looking forward to seeing the fox mask Anbu again and properly thank him for his rescue. As he walked towards the place he had called home for so long, he realized that he didn't really want to return there, nor could he. The cleanup wasn't done yet and Sasuke didn't want to see the dead again. The Hokage had told him to rest in an inn until the Uchiha compound was suitable for living again. So he turned around and headed in a different direction when he noticed a blond boy sitting on a pier, staring into the water, then raising his head to look at him. At first they exchanged glares and were both ready to turn their heads away, then, strangely, they both smiled at each other. For Sasuke, it was refreshing to see someone giving him neither pity nor absurd praise, but just treat him normally. For Naruto, it was the feeling of feeling someone who felt the same loneliness that he did. Sasuke approached and sat down next to Naruto. For what seemed like an eternity, neither spoke a word. Then Naruto spoke. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki." "Sasuke Uchiha." Sasuke replied. Naruto nodded. No condolences, no prodding, just that nod. "Say, do you want to be a ninja when you're older?" he asked. Sasuke nodded. "Of course." Naruto grinned. "Me too. Do you want to train together sometime? But I warn you, I train hard." Sasuke remembered his training with Itachi and smiled despite the sting in his heart. "Hard I can handle. Next Tuesday. We'll meet here." Naruto nodded. "I have a place I like to train, but it's a distance away from Konoha. Do you know a good place to train?" Sasuke nodded. "There is one in my compound." His voice trailed off. Naruto gave him a short comradely pat on the shoulder before slowly getting up. "I heard what happened." He snorted. "It's impossible not to in this village. But as much as it hurt, what happened, happened. You can't change the past, but you can change the present to form the future. Well, I'll see you Tuesday." With that, he walked away. Sasuke stared after the boy, Naruto. For some reason, Sasuke felt better. He knew a bit about that boy, though the different sources painted very different pictures. His father had described Naruto as a beast, as a being with no pride or honor, that used the kindness of the old fool, commonly known as the Hokage, to escape his deserved fate. His mother had described him as a troublemaker and had warned Sasuke not to get close to the boy. Itachi had described him as a lonely child who had few friends and an iron will. His brother had also told Sasuke that Naruto was actually a nice kid once you got to know him, that he had something that made even slightly open-minded people immediately like him and that was fiercely loyal to his friends. Itachi had also mentioned that Naruto was carrying a heavy burden for the sake of the ungrateful village, but refused to go into detail. Now that Sasuke had met Naruto, he was inclined to believe that Itachi had been closest to the truth. For some reason, he was really looking forward to next Tuesday. Naruto also smiled. He had finally made a friend that was his own age, something he had been wanting to do for a long time. and Madara seemingly agreed with his choice. A Uchiha that is not rotten is a good choice for a friend. Before Konoha existed, we were known to never abandon a comrade. Sadly that changed, but I still hold hope for the Uchiha now that the taint has been purged. With some help and a little push in the right direction, he could do great things. He stated. Naruto nodded, not really getting what Madara was saying, but thinking that it basically meant Sasuke had talent. Minato was also happy that his son finally found a friend, even though he thought it amusing that he chose Fugaku's child as his friend. When Minato was young, Fugaku Uchiha had been his #1 pain in the ass. The man had, to quote Kushina, 2 10-foot poles stuck up his ass, one of them sideways. Still, Sasuke seemed to be an okay guy, and parents and their children weren't always identical. I agree with Madara. The boy has talent and he could be a valuable comrade. He said, making up his mind. Naruto nodded eagerly. He could hardly wait until Tuesday. Sarutobi sighed deeply, feeling a massive headache coming. Itachi had reported that a Sharingan-wielding Anbu in a fox mask that seemed to possess frightening power had shown up, saving his brother from a potentially traumatizing jutsu. Itachi had thought it may be one of the Hokage's black ops, seeing that the man hadn't even attempted to follow Itachi. And now Sasuke had described the same person, a Anbu in a fox mask, and asked Sarutobi to deliver his thanks. Sarutobi gave Sasuke a serious look. Sasuke, listen to me. You say that Anbu wearing the kitsune mask saved you, right? Sasuke nodded, not seeing the problem. Yes, he drove Itachi off with a killing intent like you wouldn't believe. What's the problem? I mean yes, Anbu's identities are supposed to be a secret, but can't you at least deliver him my gratitude? Sarutobi shook his head. I can't. You see, the problem is, there is no Anbu wearing the kitsune mask. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock. What? Sarutobi nodded. There hasn't been a single kitsune in the Anbu for over 7 years. You see Sasuke, the previous owner of the mask retired, and before a successor to that title could be chosen, the Kyuubi attacked. You can imagine that nobody wanted to wear the mask after that. I gathered some information. Anbu masks are designed with certain seals, though you can never tell who made these seals, for safety reasons. Now, apparently the maker of the kitsune mask went a little over the top and made it practically indestructible, so the people at headquarters eventually just threw it away. You see, anyone could have that mask right now. Sasuke nodded. He said he had long since cut ties with the clan because he thought they were becoming too arrogant. That was news to Sarutobi. Apparently, the Enigma had made conversation with Sasuke after driving off Itachi. What exactly did he say? Sasuke, this is important. Maybe we can determine the alliance of this ninja. Sasuke blinked. You think he's an enemy of Konoha? Sarutobi shrugged. I'm not sure, but if you're the Hokage, you have to take every possibility into account. Sasuke nodded and told the Hokage all he could remember. When he was done, the Hokage sat down nodding, lost in thoughts. I see. From what you told me, I'd say he had some disdain for the clan, but I don't think he betrayed the village. Usually, those that do somehow mark their defection, usually they scratch their headbands. If he was a Nuke Nin, he would have somehow marked the Konoha insignia. Still, we can't rule out the possibility that the man that saved you was an enemy that chose to leave the insignia intact to gain less attention. Sasuke nodded. He didn't think that the man in the kitsune mask was an enemy, but still he knew that in the world of shinobi, the global motto was better safe than sorry, and that counted double when dealing with unknown people. Sarutobi sighed. You may leave, Sasuke. Sasuke nodded. Thank you, Hokage-sama. And he left, while Sarutobi wondered how much he should tell the council. But both shared a single thought. Who is this kitsune? Tuesday had come and Sasuke had been baffled at the training Naruto put himself through on a near-daily basis. The first hour had left Sasuke gasping for air and he had barely even started on chakra control. However, Sasuke took it like a good sportsman and asked if they could train again, maybe on a more moderate level. Naruto happily agreed, eager to spend time with his new friend. Needless to say that the civilians were not happy that the demon brat was infecting the last Uchiha, but with the Hokage supporting the friendship and the noticeable improvement in Sasuke's mental constitution and mood, there was little they could do. They trained on a daily basis, improving at a baffling pace, both physically, chakra-wise, and in their knowledge of non-elemental jutsu. And before one noticed, a year had passed. Naruto was training at his private ground, alone for a change. It was the day of the massacre, and Sasuke had remained in Konoha for the day, paying his respects to his deceased family. So Naruto was alone for the day. He had gone through enhanced physical training and chakra control and was plain and simply on his knees when he saw 2 figures enter the clearing, locked up in an argument. One of them looked normal, the other one seemed too short and bulky, almost like a humanoid snail. They were both wearing black cloaks with red clouds. Sasori and Deidara were not getting along. Both were wondering what the leader had been thinking when he put the two of them together. Yes, they both considered themselves artists, but that was it. And their ideas of art couldn't have been further apart. Which led to constant bickering between the two, going so far that Itachi and Kisame, Itachi's new partner, were having a bet going on which of the two artists would kill the other one first. Right now they were at it again. I tell ya, Sasori, true beauty is fleeting, only existing for a moment before fading away. Deidara stated. Sasori snorted. What would a pup like you know about art? True art is eternal, resisting all, remaining unchanged for eternities. Deidara rolled his eyes. Ever tried looking at something for an extended period of time? Everything gets boring if you stare at it for a while, nothing happening. Sasori shook his head. You have no idea about art. But again, what did I expect from someone who blows his village's leader to smithereens? Deidara grimaced. Like you're one to talk. I heard you took your village's leader and made a doll out of him. Would you do it? Sasori tilted his head. He was a horrible tyrant that I couldn't leave in command. Deidara snorted. Yeah right. He probably insulted your doll play and you wanted his power. That was part of the reason, but Sasori had told the truth. The Sandaime Kazekage had been a horrible tyrant, suppressing the villagers and ruling with an iron fist. Sasori had taken and killed him, expecting that Suna would have a small fit, throw a party, then he'd return, get his demotion and a slap on the wrists, and life would go on. What had happened was that Suna had sent all available forces to find their evil leader and mark Sasori as an S-rank nuke nin, commonly called missing nin. It had been a shock to Sasori, who had suddenly been robbed of his home. With nowhere to go, Sasori had wandered the nations, killing those coming for his head and turning them into puppets until Akatsuki approached him. They offered shelter from the constant attacks, and since Sasori didn't know what else to do, he had joined. In a way it was sad. Sasori was fighting for an ideal he didn't believe in, he was, or rather would soon be, spreading the word he didn't hear. Sasori glared at Deidara. And why did you kill that Tsuchikage? Deidara gave a humorless chuckle. Ironic really, but for the same reason you named. He was a horrible tyrant that I simply couldn't leave in command. Sasori raised a brow. Are you sure he didn't just annoy you and insulted your firecrackers? Again, Sasori's words had truth in them, but Deidara had not done it for that reason. The Tsuchikage had been as much a despot as the Kazekage, but he had had a worse character. He had permitted slavery, including the killing the slaves, and even female ninja, who belonged to the Tsuchikage only, could not file a complaint if they were raped. The final straw for Deidara had been when the Tsuchikage had sold a childhood friend that Deidara was planning to marry to an important nobleman who had degraded, raped and eventually killed her, slicing her throat in front of Deidara when he had tired of her. Deidara had patiently waited until the nobleman and the Tsuchikage had met again in the latter's office, then blasted it to hell, killing them both. One thing one must know about Iwa, a village located in a small valley, is that while the majority of it was built inside of the canyon walls, there are many large towers inside of the valley. In these towers Iwa does its business, merchants set up camp and store their goods there. The oldest and largest tower is the village center of sorts. Here the civilians and many ninjas spend a majority of their time, and the top floors are reserved for the Tsuchikage. His home and office are there, on the place with the best view over Iwa. But as Deidara had to find out, the Tsuchikage's tower was not only the oldest, but also the most fragile building in Iwa. When Deidara killed his mortal foes, the entire tower had collapsed, killing hundreds, if not thousands. Flashback. Deidara watched the tower collapse in silent horror, his nails digging into the flesh beside his eyes. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He snorted, then a chuckle escaped his lips. The chuckle grew louder until Deidara was laughing madly. Ha-ha-bwah-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. People looked up and saw him, riding his clay bird. A man in red samurai armor suddenly jumped up, steam lifting him until he was standing behind Deidara. The man grabbed Deidara's shoulder and spun him around. Deidara, what have you done? Have you completely lost your mind? What were you? The rest died on his lips when he saw Deidara. Tears were running down his face, even while he was laughing. Deidara's fingers had long since clawed away the skin on his cheekbones and were now digging their way into his flesh. Deidara looked at the man, finally stopping in his laughter. And, it just fell apart. I killed them, the scum who slaughtered Natsumi, but the tower just fell apart. Tell me Han, why did the tower collapse? Was it me? Was it my art? Was this the beauty of destruction? I'm an artist, is it not my duty to create beauty? Does beauty lie in annihilation? It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it must, yeah. Yeah. Han finally understood. It was no small secret that Deidara's love, a civilian, had been sold by the Tsuchikage. The man had done it to show Deidara his power, to remind him that as a shinobi, Deidara belonged to him alone, while the civilians belonged to whoever the Tsuchikage wanted them to belong to, and made the mistake of saying that right into Deidara's face. Everyone who knew Dadara knew that he hated his cage and would not let this rest. He had taken revenge, but the tower hadn't been as eternal as everyone was taught. And now Dadara was breaking because of the results of his actions, going insane to keep himself from falling apart. If nobody stopped him, he'd probably have convinced himself that art was only found in blowing the shit out of stuff in a few minutes. Han did the only thing he could think of. He slapped Dadara in the face. "Wake up. What are you babbling about? Think of what Natsumi would say if she saw you like this." Dadara blinked, slowly coming back to reality. She'd tell me to stop sulking. She always said, "Screw the past, live the present, make the future. I hate you, Han, and we both know that, but today, I'm grateful for your actions. However, I can't stay in Iowa, not after this. Goodbye, Han, let us never meet again. But for me to make my exit, I'm afraid I have to lose some weight. Brace for impact." With that, the bird tilted, Han barely managing to stick with a foot. Dadara saw it and threw 2 of his clay spiders at him. Han caught them, Dadara muttered katsu. And the twin explosions knocked Han off for good. While he broke his fall with steam, Han watched the clay bird shrink until it was no longer visible. "Goodbye, Dadara. Han thought I hated you, but I know you were loyal to your village, and now, perhaps for its own best, you leave it. May we never meet again." Dadara had fled Iowa, not at all surprised when he had found himself in S-class Nuke Nin. But unlike Sasori, he had not come far before Akatsuki had cornered him. He had refused to join, then Itachi had shown up and taken him down with a few basic genjutsu, his Tsukiyomi and a shitload of skill. Begrudgingly, he had chosen to join Akatsuki, essentially live to fight another day, over being killed on the spot. Ever since that day, he had, in that case actually with Sasori's help, constructed a device that would cover his left eye and constantly put genjutsu on it as long as he fed it with chakra. The level of the genjutsu could be adjusted, going from simple ones to Tsukiyomi quality. He had been wearing it for a few months, and after getting used to it, he could now not only operate on the same level as before, but his left eye was now able to see through almost all low-level genjutsu. Shaking himself from the painful memories, Dadara looked up and saw a young kid kneeling on the ground, seemingly catching his breath. Then he saw the whisker marks. "What have we here? Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you think that the kid there is the Kyuubi's vessel?" Sasori looked at the kid. "He matches the descriptions, and we're close enough to Konoha, so it's possible." Dadara looked at him. "Now what? We snatch him?" Sasori thought about it, then he shook his head. Leader was clear when he said that while the 9 Bijuu are the most important things we need, that we should try to get other, preferably unsealed and therefore unmissed demons first. He also mentioned that the Kyuubi is special and that after sealing it, we can no longer seal other demons, so it has to go last. Taking the kid now would only call Konoha on our tails and we'd have to find a place to keep the kid for years. All in all, there's no point. Dadara nodded, then he grinned. "I have an idea." Sasori raised a brow. "A rare occurrence." "Shut up." Dadara hissed. "We simply let the kid decide what art is as an uninvolved party." Sasori snorted. "He's a little kid. Little kids love explosions." He stated, but he still started moving towards the kid. Dadara grinned. "I know." Naruto looked at the 2 approaching figures. They didn't seem bad, he had developed a keen sense of who wanted to hurt him if not, so Naruto immediately classified them as friendly. He waved and smiled at them. "Hi, I'm Naruto, nice to meet you. What are you doing here? This place is a good distance away from any road." Minato was not as trusting. "Watch out, Naruto, I don't trust the blonde one." "Why?" Naruto asked. "In the war, I fought and killed many shinobi from Iowa. They weren't very good losers and they hate me and anything that has anything to do with me can be associated with me or resembles me. Last I heard, Iowa killed off all toads because I summoned them. Jiraiya is having a hard time not only getting into Iowa, but Tsuchi no Kuni altogether, and children that even faintly resemble me are banished or killed." Minato explained. Naruto wasn't too worried. "They don't look like they want to hurt me, and if push comes to shove, I can surprise them and make a break for it." The 2 men looked at him. Then the blonde one spoke. "Name's Dadara, that's my partner Sasori. We're just going our way, sheer coincidence that we landed here. But, since we are here and you are too, maybe you can help us." Naruto nodded, he was always happy to help. "Sure." Now Sasori spoke. "We were discussing about art. In my opinion, art is something that exists for eternities, resisting the ever-changing times with sovereign beauty." Dadara cleared his throat. "And I tell him that's boring. Things that never change cannot captivate for long. I believe that true art is fleeting, something that exists for but a moment before fading away." Naruto tilted his head. It was a difficult question. Then he spoke. "I'm an amateur, but isn't both art? Fireworks are beautiful, but a painting can be as well. I always thought that it wasn't important how long something exists, but what effect it has on the people that see it." Deidara and Sasori blinked, then they looked at each other. After a few seconds, they both chuckled. Leave it to a kid to point out something so obvious that everyone else missed it. Deidara said. Sasori nodded. Then he looked at Naruto. You still haven't told us what you were doing out here in the middle of nowhere. Naruto scratched his head. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm training here, since I want to become Hokage one day, I need to be strong. He smiled widely. Sasori chuckled. A grand dream. What do you think, Deidara? I'm surprised you're not squeezing the life out of him yet, considering who he greatly resembles. Deidara waved his hand. Spare me the history lesson. The kid could be the Flash's twin, child or reincarnation for all I care. If I have to hear one more speech about how we must avenge the humiliation the Yondaime Hokage gave us, I'll puke. Sasori tilted his head. Really? Give me a minute, I'll draft one. Deidara glared at his partner. Don't you dare. He looked back at Naruto. So why out here? Why not in Konoha, where people would help you and you can play with your friends? Naruto's eyes turned sad. Because I'm not safe there. I spent my early childhood alone, the only one who cared for me was Jiji, and he had many duties, so he couldn't spend a lot of time with me. Jiji? Sasori asked. What Naruto had told him reminded Sasori of his own childhood. No friends, denounced as weird, Baba the only one that looked after him, and having to leave him completely alone because of her duties for 3/4 of the time. Feelings that Sasori thought he had long forgotten began to re-emerge inside of him. He decided that he'd help a little. Not much, just a push in the right direction. Naruto scratched his head again. Well, he wasn't really my grandfather, but since I'm an orphan, he looked after me. For the first years of my life, he was the only one I had. Later I made a few friends, but only one of them is my age, and I only met him a year ago. Deidara remembered that thanks to his multitude of mouths, he had spent his childhood as an outcast, with only a single friend, the same one he had violently lost, thanks to the late Tsuchikage and that detestable nobleman. He knew how precious true friends were, and decided to help the kid keep his. Of course he couldn't just teach him S-class jutsu, but there was one he liked, not because of its offensive abilities, which were slim to none, but because it was a very useful jutsu to know. Tell you what, Naruto. I'll teach you a jutsu, one of my personal favorites. It's not a destructive one, but it saved my neck a few times. It's called Doten. Muguraku no Jutsu and it allows you to travel through the ground. I'll even throw in the advanced form, Doten. Dachu Senku, which is the same thing, only you can move much faster. My tip is learn them in the order I gave them. They're both C ranked, but trust me, with a little imagination, they pack a punch. These are the hand signs. He showed them to Naruto, who was thinking about the new highs these jutsu would give his prankster career. Thanks, Deidara Nyasan. Sasori Nyasan, don't you think they're cool? Sasori chuckled. Nyasan, huh. Very well, I have something for you as well, but first, you should see my real face. With that, the hooded body rose, and a smaller figure with red hair slipped out. He shook his head. It's been a while since I left Hiroku, my transport puppet. He looked at Naruto, who was gaping at him. As you can see, I'm a puppeteer. What'll teach you something that can both be used as an attack and exercise for chakra control. I'll teach you how to create chakra strings. Deidara gave Sasori a distrusting glance. Are you trying to make the kid a puppeteer? Sasori shook his head. No, I can tell that he is not the type for the art of puppetry. He will want to fight his enemies personally, not with a puppet doing the fighting. Still, the threads can be used for more than puppetry. He turned back to Naruto and explained how to form the strings. Afterwards Naruto told them a little about himself, and they spoke about themselves and what things were like in their homes. Until Deidara asked a single question. So Naruto, how many people are on your side? Naruto scratched his head. Well, there's Hokage Jiji, old man Ichiraku and his daughter, my newest friend Sasuke, a teacher at Ruka who I swear has some magical abilities. He always catches me when I make a prank, it's not fair. Anko Nisan likes me, but she's a little weird. Anyways, then there are a few Anbu that like me, namely Kakashi Nyasan, Tenzo Nyasan, Yuigao Nisan and Itachi Nyasan. Deidara looked up, staring like Christmas had come early. Itachi. As in Itachi Uchiha. Naruto nodded. Yep, that's him. I still don't think he just killed his family for no reason, it's not like him. Deidara's grin threatened to split his face. Do tell me more. And Naruto told them more, Sasori and Deidara exchanging glances that showed that they had the same idea. Itachi wouldn't know what hit him. Soon, the sun was sinking, and Sasori and Deidara decided to say goodbye to the blonde kid who, so they noticed, somehow had managed to worm his way into their hearts. Itachi was nervous for some reason. Sasori had asked if they could have a talk between four eyes, and Itachi complied, knowing that the puppeteer was not the type of person for idle and pointless chatter. He entered one of Akatsuki's training halls, which were deserted except for a lone figure, who now raised his head to look at him. You're right on time. Not too early, not too late. Good. I hate waiting or making others wait. Itachi bit his lip. In Konoha, when someone was told that he wasn't late, the usual reply was, "Am I Kakashi?" But he wasn't sure if Sasori would get the joke, so he swallowed that. "Why have you called me?" he asked instead. Sasori nodded. Straight to the point, good. You see, on my last journey, I came a bit close to Konoha and I met a blonde kid with whisker marks. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki, to be exact. Itachi's eyes narrowed slightly, this was not good. And what did you do with it? Nothing. Sasori replied. Leader said the Kyuubi has to go last, so there's no point in taking it now. Besides, I believe you volunteered to get the Kyuubi, so why should I do your job? Itachi nodded. I see. But you didn't call me here just to tell me that, did you? Sasori shook his head. No, I didn't. You see, I had a very interesting conversation with little Naruto and he told me some fascinating stories about his Itachi Nyasan. Itachi jumped backwards, Sharingan activated and prepared for a fight. Sasori looked at him. You cannot defeat me Itachi, you lack experience, former Anbu or not. Itachi ground his teeth. We'll see. He said. Sasori still made no move to attack. You never had any intention of capturing Kyuubi, did you? Itachi activated his Mangekyo. No. But you know too much. Tsukuyomi. Sasori remained calm. Jinjutsu, even the famous Tsukuyomi, do not work on me. Itachi cursed silently, his Jinjutsu were useless. Then I'll improvise. He stated. I think not. A voice behind Itachi spoke and suddenly Itachi felt something tighten on his neck like a collar. He looked down and saw a snake made of white clay that was on his neck like a too small necklace. There was only one person who used that kind of clay in Akatsuki and that person hated Itachi's guts. Idara. Itachi stated. Correct. Came the mocking voice. Did you forget that Akatsuki always travel in groups of 2? Don't turn around, I'd hate to be hit by your Jinjutsu. And don't try anything funny, that snake has more than enough power to take your head off. Itachi knew he was beaten. What do you want? He asked. Idara grinned. Sasori, what should we do with this traitor? Sasori looked at Itachi. If I find a way to use his eyes, he'd make a good puppet, so try to leave the head at least somewhat intact. Itachi was close to a panic. It couldn't just end like this. Then Deidara spoke again. You know, if you don't work for Akatsuki, why are you here? Itachi knew there was no point in lying, but that was no reason to tell them everything. I intended to gather information that may save Naruto's life. Deidara nodded. I see. Well, that's all we wanted to know, so there's no point in doing this anymore. Sasori nodded to Deidara. Do it. Itachi closed his eyes and waited for the end. Deidara grinned. Katsu. After 10 seconds, he opened them again. The clay snake had exploded, but it wasn't worse than a firecracker and most of the blast had gone outwards. Itachi didn't even had a burn on his neck. A dud. He wondered, then he trashed that thought. Deidara didn't make duds, if he wanted that his creations to trash something, it'd be trashed. Which only left the logical conclusion that Deidara didn't want to kill Itachi. But why? When he turned around, Deidara grinned at him. That look was priceless. Gave you quite a scare, huh? Why? That was all Itachi managed to say. Deidara shrugged. Why we didn't kill ya? You don't want Naruto to die, we don't want Naruto to die, so why should I blow your lights out? Sasori nodded. Don't ask me how, but he managed to sneak his way into our hearts. For the first time since he joined Akatsuki, technically second if you counted the time Haiden had kicked Samehada off the top of a tower, only for Kisame to immediately jump after it, Itachi smiled. He does that to people, doesn't he? Deidara nodded. You can say that again. What if Hashirama seal all Senju clan chakra inside Naruto, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.